Good evening. Welcome to Orthodox Christian Theology. And with me today is Deacon Joseph Suaiden. Deacon Joseph, how are we doing?
We're doing great. To everybody, it's the first day of October on the new calendar. Is a happy feast of Saint Eumenes of Gortina for those on the old. It's a great day to discuss the history of Roman Catholic traditionalism.
Well, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And this show was inspired by your awesome YouTube still that you made with Jude Law from the young Pope and the clown Pope that we have today, Pope Francis. And I'm like, you have to do. I have to steal just the picture. And he said, "Well, I don't feel like doing the whole episode." I'm like, all right, so if you're not going to do the episode anymore, how about you do it with me? Because we got to use the picture somehow. And so, right from the offset, this show is meant to be fun. Share your memes on the Discord group. The link is below in the info bar. So share your Roman Catholic themed memes in the Discord group, and we will share them. Also, we're going to get discussion of the issue of Roman Catholic traditionalism from Deacon Joseph Suaiden. And so we'll start with that, but we'll use that as a leaping off point. And for everyone else, we're going to just this is going to be a lot like Orthodox Apologetics channel, whose link is also down here, Deacon Joseph's channel, which is getting memeier by the day. And so that being said, feel free to interrupt. We're going to bring audience in and interrupt during this, and we're going to have fun with this. How's that sound, Deacon?
Sounds good to me.
So anyway, someone's like, what's the Discord server? It's in the link. Click the link, and you'll figure it out. So that being said, when we say Roman Catholic traditionalism, what I think is just people being Roman Catholic the way people were always Roman Catholic. Is that some sort of anachronism? Did what's traditional change over time? Being that the Roman Catholic Church is about 1,000 years old, when does it start becoming traditional? Are there different eras of traditionalism? How about you get us started on that, Deacon?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I can actually, that's a good place to start. I can start with there was a traditionalist Roman Catholic bishop in Miami back when I was a catechumen. And he actually addressed exactly what you said. One of the things that was interesting is that he was fairly popular among the Hispanic community. He spoke in their language. He tried to reach out to them. And he tried to just, the church looked very ordinary for a traditionalist Roman Catholic church. And I said to him, this is a pretty popular church here. And he's like, that's because we're trying to actually do it the way it was done. And the way it was done was messy. Too many of these traditionalist churches you go around, everything is absolutely perfect. And that's not real. That's just not real. So I think it's very interesting that you're correct in your first assumption that that's not consistent. It seems like it at first, but in fact it is. It draws itself into conclusions that as we continue going through the history, you'll see become more and more absurd till we get to the present day.
All right, so I'm guessing that traditionalism really, in its nascent stages, is really in reaction to the Enlightenment. So it's going to be beginning probably in the 1800s. And what we have in the beginning then has nothing in common with what we have today. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about that origin? If we're talking about in the era of Vatican I and what they were responding to?
Oh, absolutely. You're not wrong there. Really, modernism really comes into existence, in the Roman Catholic Church around the 1800s. And so really, and it wasn't just about religious matters, but also politics, so on and so forth. There were movements to restrict the power of the papacy and the papal hierarchy in countries as new social movements, new political movements came into being. So, you had in that sense, the modernists today would be considered having taken over the concepts that they held back then, some of which we share, there's a huge monarchist trend among Orthodox, which I agree with, but that actually existed in Roman Catholicism as well, because they did have monarchies. That was literally democratized and destroyed away in the late 1800s, which coincidentally is the exact same time that the First Vatican Council decided to codify this concept of papal infallibility and declare it a dogma effectively. Ironically, because of the constant conflict that was going on in Europe at the time, it's been argued that they did not complete the council. I would argue that, to some degree it was completed, but the point is that, so we're talking about radical change in the 1800s. You've talked a lot about John Henry Newman, for example. He was central in this because his thinking was considered by many to be modernist, and that many Roman Catholics considered him.
It's traditional today, but it was totally innovative at its time.
Right, exactly. Now everyone's like, of course, St. John Henry Newman, he's perfectly normal. But the thing is, back then, the concept of even the development of doctrine to them was alien. So this is something to keep in mind, that while most Roman Catholics take it as a natural given now, that would never have existed among the Roman Catholics of the late 1700s to early 1800s. In fact, their thinking would have been more closer to just assuming the fathers were right on certain things and leaving it at that. And so
let's talk about that, because Zealous Seraphim says a comment that's relevant to exactly what you just said. He said, I had an argument with a Catholic, I want to say Roman Catholic, we're Orthodox Catholics, online, who told me he believed Orthos rely too much on the church fathers and that Pope Francis is more Christian than them. I was astonished anyone could think that. And so to piggyback off Zealous Justin, what I would say is, I had people tell me, oh, you're sola scriptura, but sola patristica. You're just cherry picking the fathers. And I go, well, wait a second. Just because I don't cite a scholar that agrees with what all these fathers are saying, that doesn't mean I'm not using the actual methodology of the fathers themselves, which would be to understand the harmony of the scriptures and the fathers. So it's sort of a kind of meme Roman Catholic apologetic that, well, because you Orthodox actually follow what the fathers say, that is too extreme, and that in reality, we need to have these scholars and we need to have this papacy. And we're going to get into how really what traditionalism is a sort of modernism. And we'll get into that later. So it's interesting you bring that up. But ultimately, John Henry Newman, his view, I feel, was prevailing, even if it wasn't intentionally prevailing in the 1800s, because they were quoting St. Vincent de Lérins on the issue of doctrinal development, not in the sense, obviously, of what St. Vincent meant by it, because that wasn't the point. They're likely keeping in mind what John Henry Newman had in mind, because he was the one who translated, for example, St. Vincent de Lérins in the 1800s. So that aside, we have Vatican I as a response to all this epistemic uncertainty that the Enlightenment had introduced really into popular Roman Catholic thought. I mean, where did the French Revolution occur? It happened in France with the stalwarts of Roman Catholicism. And so when you read what Vatican I says, I'm going to quote it. It says, and this is in the decree of Vatican I, he set Blessed Peter over the rest of the apostles and instituted in him the permanent principle of both unities and their visible foundation. Translation, guys, that means if you're not communing with the Pope, you can't have a church that's actually universal or Catholic. This doctrine is to be believed and held by all the faithful in accordance with the ancient and unchanging faith of the whole church. And so the bar which Vatican I sets for itself is very high. This is what the church has always believed.
Right. And
now, what John Henry Newman gives people is a way like, well, what does really believe really mean, right? Now, before people, because that's obviously the view that's taken over Roman Catholicism today, including with the neo-trads and their online apologetics and all that.
It's worth noting, wasn't Newman uncomfortable with the doctrine of infallibility at first? If I remember correctly, he signed on to it, but from what I understood, he really didn't want there to be a definition.
Well, from what I've read, he didn't want there to be a definition because for pragmatic purposes. He felt that it would have prevented more Anglicans and whatnot from going to union. Not that he explicitly disagreed with that doctrine.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
But again, I'm getting that from Roman Catholic scholars, so that could actually be wrong. I have not read enough on Newman on that point.
Well, he went into union himself, so I think that's actually quite plausible. I just never heard that.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
And so someone points out in this important, Manning and not Newman was representative 19th century thought. So anyone who's reading, and if people not aware, Manning was an ultramontanist and Newman really was not. And so this is an important point, and I'll keep it up because it shows that when you read stuff from the 1800s and you read the Roman Catholics, the Anglicans arguing back and forth, because that's the apologetics we have in the English language. The Orthodox they wrote, a couple encyclicals and councils in the 1800s, which are pretty much just as terse. But what they all take for granted is that the Manning view is the default Roman Catholic view. That was the popular view, right?
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
really what Newman gave to the Roman Catholic Church was the back door. And the more and more the Roman Catholic claims become untenable historically, that back door has now been propped open permanently. So I'm going to give you an opportunity for comments, Deacon, and then maybe if you could get us more into the 1900s with where this is heading.
Yeah. Manning did represent. I would agree that Manning did represent. He kind of represented the ultramontane wing of Roman Catholicism, but the truth is, Newman's views by the beginning of the 20th century, not just Newman's, but other modern thinkers, modernist thinkers, I should say, began to creep in more and more, particularly among the American clergy. A particularly famous example and relevant to Orthodox today is Archbishop John Ireland. Archbishop John Ireland was a modernist, and he said, unite the church with the age, and he was hailed as a hero in France. Of course, our experience with John Ireland is that he basically caused Father Alexis to return to Orthodoxy and bring thousands of people with him. So, interestingly, modernism from the very beginning has been sending people to Orthodoxy, just inadvertently and usually because of their own stupidity. But I'm not saying that the modernists were stupid, but sometimes they were often very short-sighted because they tended to think in terms of trends. And this is something that we'll see over and over we could talk about what's his name, the guy who the evolutionist, the Jesuit, Teilhard de Chardin, and now he was kind of involved in certain frauds, for example, that were related to evolutionary finds, like
the tilt down man or something.
Yep, exactly, where they sawed down like an ape's teeth to make it look like it was a transitional human. And so the point is, but his views and his theology went further and deeper into the consciousness of an evolving Roman Catholicism. The Roman Catholicism, as we mentioned, of 1800 and the Roman Catholicism of 1900 are already radically different. But once we start getting to the 10s and 20s, things get worse. With Providentissimus Deus, I believe it is.
Leo... let me interrupt, because Tom McLeod says even Pius X defended Newman's concept of doctrinal development. So you're saying how this starts taking off in the early 1900s.
And so when people tend to think of especially when you talk to Roman Catholics about it, Pius IX or Pius X held no modernist ideas. That's incorrect. He's already been altered. And so he opens the door, and Leo XIII opened the door to higher biblical criticism, which, modernist scholarship, etc. That really begins there, and it finally reaches its apex in 42 with Divino Affolanti Spiritu, where they basically say, okay, we're going to dump the Latin Vulgate and we're going to start translating the Bible out of the original languages. So, these things have psychological effects on people. If you know about family Bibles, I'm sure you might have one of those big gigantic Bibles that have like the names of the family written, stuff like that. And some of these carried for generations, especially like the Haydock Bibles. You can still find some on eBay that are 200 years old. And now all of a sudden the church is saying, okay, well, your family Bible's no good anymore. We're going to go get you a new one. And it's going to have much better language, which it never did. And so these things had an effect. And I would say it was a dulling effect. Not just that, but this is also the period right before the 1900s and onward where the Black Fast begins to disappear. So, and the Black Fast, for those who don't know, is basically very close to the Orthodox fast. It's, Wednesday, Friday fasting, full fast before Nativity for 40 days, or for 28 days, full fast before, Pascha, etc. You had to, abstain from everything like we do, except they allowed fish, because that's been an ancient Western custom, and I think even our Western Rite people do actually allow fish. I know I ate it.
All right, let's just fess up. Do you do Western? Are you into Western Rite for the fish?
It helped.
I have to tell you, I like fish and I like shrimp. And so even when it's not fast days, I'll eat these things. And people are like, why do you want to have shrimp today? And I'm like, it's because it tastes good. And I remember before I was Orthodox, my go-to meal for guests was to make shrimp scampi, right? Okay. And now, like, that doesn't mean anything to your Orthodox guests. It's like, it's not a fat. Why would I want shrimp scampi? And they're like, well, there's butter in it.
I'll tell you, that's something that, that was one thing I can say from having done the Western Rite for a long time, is that after a while, people tend to think, like, I'm getting off topic here, but people tend to think, well, that's great, you have fish. That would be nice if we could have fish. I'm telling you, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Like, it improves your diet just slightly. And then basically you're still eating the vegetables and everything and stuff like that.
It comes down to it. It's all about submitting your will to a will that's not your own. It's an obedience. And that's really the blessing, right? I mean, the fact that we could have shrimp, that's pretty darn good too. So it's something for people to keep in mind.
Yeah, and in Russia, that was considered a Greek fast when I lived there. Like they would just did vegetables. I was like, wow.
And that's true. And for some, hummus has oil. They won't have hummus and all that fun stuff.
No hummus?
No hummus? Yes. So we're taking a quick meme break. This is shared by an Oriental Orthodox person. When an Orthodox patriarch does a modernism, the patriarch's wrong. All right, so we see that. When the Pope does a modernism, no, it wasn't ex cathedra. He didn't really mean that. Meaning took it out of context. It wasn't a statement of faith and morals. Did I mention it wasn't ex cathedra? So there you go. There's our first meme. We need more memes. More memes, people. So, all right. So being that, I'm just going to stop sharing meme for a second. Memes on Discord, guys. Links down there. If you don't know how to use it, take your ginkgo biloba or whatever, so you know how to use your computer. So it starts picking up at the 20s and 30s, and I'm guessing what is properly considered trad really takes off after Vatican II. So you want to give us the history now going into the 20s into Vatican II?
Right. So once you get the notion that Roman Catholicism of the 1800s and Roman Catholicism of the 1900s, early 1900s, were already radically different. There were no fasts. Somebody noted of the change in the view on Genesis, attempts to reconcile Roman Catholicism with modern sciences, and I have a shrimp lo mein story. I just all
right. Okay, tell that shrimp lo mein story right now. Then we get back to how Roman Catholicism 1800s and 1900s is already becoming radically different. So tell us about that shrimp lo mein.
It's a weird story, but this is way back in the early days of the internet when we had these email lists, and this one was called the Paroticus list, and I was a fairly new convert.
Were you on CompuServe?
I was not on CompuServe.
Were you on Prodigy?
Yeah, it was on Prodigy, I think. But
All right,
anyway,
so we're old enough to know what these things are. All these Zoomers, like, what? What's
yeah.
CompuServe? What's
But
dial-up?
this was actually a Yahoo group, and so what happens is, as everyone knows, among the Greek calendars, you have many people who are, they're born over there and old school and have, kind of old world thoughts on things. But somebody had mentioned, and it was an older Greek priest, something about not going to Chinese food places, and I was like, because I had just mentioned shrimp lo mein during the fast, and so I was a brand new convert, so this guy is like, you can't go to the Chinese restaurant to have shrimp lo mein. I'm like, why not? And he's like, because they sacrifice to their gods and sprinkle snake oil all over the food. And
The
I'm like,
snake oil is where the flavor comes from, though.
I don't think they sprinkle snake oil. Snake oil is pretty expensive. It's usually just like lard and soybean
Well,
oil.
according to my wife and my mother-in-law, they eat rats.
Oh yeah, no, that's true, but that's not allowed on the menu here. I think the health departments would shut that down if they caught that. I'm not saying that maybe there's a couple of buffets that might have snuck it in, but the point is, I don't know if they're open anymore.
There you go.
So I said, I told the priest, I said, look, I sincerely don't believe that there's snake oil on my shrimp lo mein, and I'm going to eat it. And he's like, well, then you'll just have to worry about the snakes, and he all caps it. And I'm like looking at this like, he really, really believes this. But okay, whatever. No shrimp lo mein for him. So...
Well, I thought snakes were fine because, right? Well, no, they got bones, so could we have snakes on fast days or can't we? I think I asked Father Paisi this. He's the Orthodox priest in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and I forgot the answer he gave because they eat snakes there. So they're.
I would guess that if you can eat fish on that day, you can eat snakes because they're very similar in the sense that they do have a vertebrae, and they're cold-blooded.
Right, so vertebrae aside, Roman Catholicism, very different between 1800 and 1900s. No more black fast. So let's get back into that.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. But you still had relics from the old empire, and that's what I want to get to a man named Father Leonard Feeney. Yeah, Father John is. I agree. I think he might have been on the board back then. He might remember who that priest was. But anyway, so the point is, what's it called? We get to a guy named Father Leonard Feeney. And I'm bringing him up because his stuff is going to continually affect things even more. But he's kind of like a remainder of the old guard of the kind of 1800s thought. So here you have, this is where he basically develops this concept. He develops, it's actually a correct concept that he takes to the extreme, which is extra ecclesiam nulla salus, or outside the church there's no salvation. He takes this to go to the fullest extreme and basically begins to deny things like baptism of blood, which frankly is insane and gets him in trouble with his bishop. But he's working in Harvard. A lot of Catholic intellectuals are meeting this guy. Some famously were horrified by his teaching because he was just that extreme. And of course, he wrote about people. He wrote about the Jews too, so that always is going to make people mad. But in any case, the point is that he kind of began developing his own thing till he gets excommunicated by the diocesan bishop. I think he gets excommunicated by Rome. He creates this order called the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And so these people basically are like the first real, I guess you could say, kind of traditionalist kind of groups. But even though they came fairly late from what I remember, because this is around the 50s when he started getting excommunicated for disobedience to church authorities. This is like, he's, believe it or not, one of the last of the old guard resistors against what Roman Catholicism had become. And as I said, by the 1950s, he's already being excommunicated by Rome. The aggiornamento, as John the 23rd put it, was already well underway. They'd already thrown out Grandma's family Bible. They had already gotten rid of the fast. They already were wondering about the dinosaurs and where to put them in Genesis and stuff like this. So by that time, really the only thing that kind of stuck around psychologically in the minds of Roman Catholics was the papacy. And that's where it starts getting interesting.
Well, I see this, and it has to be said. Join the Discord mainly for the memes. All right, so we're gonna take a meme break in a second, but let me tell you a little about family lore, because on my father's side, I wasn't brought up with the religion, but my grandmother was brought up Roman Catholic. She grew up with Latin Mass and everything.
Yeah,
and really just like typical. It's ironic because Southern Italians were just really Latinized in the late 1800s. So if you went like 100 years before then, they probably have had a lot of Orthodox practices left over.
Oh yeah, no, the Metropolitan John, my former bishop, was partially Sicilian by birth, but his last name people assumed was French, but it was actually a translation of the Greek. So in fact, he's ethnically part Greek.
So there you go, and so he reverted back to form. But she recalled that it was all Latin and then it became in English, and they used to make you fast, and then you didn't have to fast, and then I forget which church which holy day this was, but you're supposed to visit 7 different churches that day, and then you didn't have to do that.
7 stations.
I'm sorry?
The 7 stations.
She said 7 churches, though, right? Aren't the stations the cross inside?
No. Stations originally meant churches. So
okay, well, that's what she's talking about. So I'm just repeating what I heard from my grandmother. And
this will get you. Fun fact of history. Those 14 stations that they have, the Stations of the Cross and the Church, are actually based around 14 Roman Catholic holy places in the Holy Land.
Okay, so there you go. It's a small pilgrimage in a sense, which is the whole point, is that you can't do the big pilgrimage to Jerusalem, but you could do like a pilgrimage in your heart here. You go in old cathedrals, they look like they have mazes on the floor, like literal mazes on, in the stone floors, because it's supposed to be like a virtual. Before there's virtual reality in your headset and your smartphone, it was the virtual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So yeah, that's a big part in a lot of the architecture and practices, and in fact, it's really good in a sense. We Orthodox have things that are analogous, like in Russia, there's a church which is like a fake Church of the Holy Sepulchre and stuff like that. So we have that stuff.
Oh yeah, too. The little grottos and stuff. I remember that. Somebody actually mentioned the Palmarians. We're not there yet. We're still at the 50s, just heading to the 60s.
But it does get to the point that how to the popular person, what was unfolding in their faith, which would have appeared unchanged and how it always was, would have been extremely radical by the time we get to Vatican II. And so even if, as neo-trad apologists will tell us today, it's all window dressing, it really doesn't matter, nothing to see here, to the average person, this was a whole different religion, because the way they interacted with it wasn't through canons and dogmas and doctrines. They didn't know that stuff. They just knew they went to their parish on Sunday. Well, and that was changing radically. So before we unfold how it changes radically, why it changes radically, let's share some more memes. Now, we're going to pick on the memes. We don't like them. We're going to say, hey, we don't like it. Send spicier memes. All right, so here's the next one. And I don't even think I don't think I can make this big enough, man. Like, you want me to share memes? Gotta be big enough. It just says, if you keep not the canons, and if you wish to destroy the statutes of our forefathers, I not know who ye are. Pope St. Gregory the Great. All right, it's
very true.
It's true, but not spicy. Right?
It's not spicy, but the picture's spicy. Seeing if you're a Roman Catholic apologist trying to make do with cope, you have to deal with the Grand Mufti of whoever on the other side. I vote spicy.
All right, your vote spicy. I don't know. It's not ironic enough for me. So let's see this one. Does this meme have anything?
This is hard.
Let's see. These are very small memes. This looks like a history lesson, man. This is not a meme.
These look like the pictures that you'd see in like those little Roman Catholic hymnals with the Protestant songs in them. Like they're just like kind of appear in the corners, like clip art.
There you go. Okay, this looks pretty memey. All right.
So yeah, anything with a Doge in it. Yeah.
If it's got Doge in it. So by the way, Deacon, how are you doing with Dogecoin? Aren't you a multimillionaire by now?
I actually never got into Dogecoin. It's one of the cryptos I never touched, only because of the fact that it was meant to be a joke. How Elon Musk has
on you.
I agree. Now you can use Dogecoin at Taco Bell. I have no argument. I missed out on that one.
So what's Doge telling us now? I assure you, Mr. Pope, painting the gates of hell behind your throne is a total coincidence. So there you go.
It's a comment on Michelangelo's Last Judgment. Strangely, though, they put a picture of the beginning of Adam's creation, whereas had they used the Last Judgment, that was true. He put a bunch of papal advisors in hell and with the demons and stuff like that. So he had a lot of fun with that.
There's a real statue that the Pope's in front of all the time that looks like the demon from hell. It's some Italian artist called the Resurrection or something. It's like Jesus resurrecting after a nuclear holocaust. Most disgusting thing you'll ever see. It's a travesty this thing would be in church. I'd share it if I remembered its name. So guys, remember its name, share it so that way I could share it with everyone and we could all have fun with it. Now, he says, this is my favorite one. Oh, there you go. You like this, Deacon Joseph. Proof. The filioque,
there
right?
it is.
It's in the creed. There it is.
Yeah, they just stuck
it was so important. They added it on top.
Yeah, for emphasis, obviously, and clearly in later and deeper ink. But that's beside the point.
There you go. It proves it. It proves that Orthodox don't understand their history. The West really believed the filioque. You see it right in the manuscript. It's real. Not fake.
Yeah, they had to put it in there. Obviously, the saint forgot it.
There you go. They had to make sure it wouldn't go without it. So we have this. Pope Zosimus and St. Augustine. What's Pope Zosimus saying? No, you can't stop me from interfering with your church. I'm the Pope. I have Peter's keys. I have universal jurisdiction. I'm supreme. By the way, that's not what he said. That's not accurate. But what's St. Augustine respond? Keep your Roman noses out of African affairs. That's not so spicy. What do you think?
If it was accurate, it would be spicy. But the fact that really Pope Zosimus didn't believe that, and then we got the triple tiara. That thing drives me nuts every time I see it. I actually saw an icon attempt with that papal tiara. The thing has its origins in the 13th century, and you put it on Saint Gregory the Great. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, we have all sorts of anachronisms and icons, so we can't get what's that word? We can't get too self-righteous about that.
Oh, I'm not self-righteous about it. I just think it's this ultimate symbol of Roman Catholicism thrown on top of a saint who we venerate. Just seems wrong to me.
Well, you know what also seems wrong? This. Where I live, 2 Orthodox churches are very liberal, such heretical, such ecumenical. Welcome to the real world, Augustine. Anyway, and the Catholic churches are very trad. It can be a temptation sometimes. Now, what I want to know is whether that's the twilight zone, simply because really the Roman Catholic churches tend not to be trad. So I would say hats off to the local parish priests that are being traditional and preserving the Roman Catholic faith. At least they're trying to preserve what they're supposed to really believe. Do you have any comments, Deacon?
Are they in obedience to the Pope on that? So, because I don't think that he has that same interest. As for, I've seen parishes where it seems kind of, it can seem very liberal, so on and so forth. And this is going to sound horrible, but sometimes you just have to wait for, the priest to retire, and then a younger priest will bring it back. And so,
it's like there's a roll call parish in Syracuse, and the priest there is very old. He's in his 90s, God bless him, old school Russian guy. But that church, in reality, will not grow until a new Jordanville priest eventually replaces him, simply because he's barely able to climb the stairs in order to do the liturgy, let alone for them to do other things to bring people into that parish. So it's, so even from a non-negative standpoint, we just got to wait for someone awful to leave. Sometimes, like these churches, when they're not big enough to have 2 priests, which they should have, like the church I go to, the priest had a stroke, so they had the other priest. They didn't get rid of the guy with the stroke, right? May he rest in peace. They had 2 priests. So that way we should try to give harder so we can have multiple priests in those situations.
Well, the truth of the matter is that, there should always be a changing of the guard. That's natural. But I think what it comes down to, and what I was really referring to, is that generationally, I've seen Orthodoxy change in the past 20 years. And when I first became Orthodox, it was basically, I hate to say this, but it kind of like a lot of time church was like semi kind of left-leaning ecumenistic stuff and a bake sale. And that's not enough. And I think a lot of people realize that. And that has changed to a very large degree over time. So I would just advise patience. Or, if you do have, I mean, I would not suggest, I mean, you could theoretically ask a bishop to start a mission, but I don't know how well that would work. But in any case, I would say be patient, but certainly remember that what is happening in Roman Catholicism, Augustine, is kind of inevitable. And so those two priests, just like time passes, will be replaced, and they'll be replaced by liberals who want to sing Kumbaya and put up pagan statues. There's no reason to go to the Roman Catholic Church, even if it looks traditional now, which most of the time it doesn't.
Now, right before we get into Vatican II, a couple comments. Wrong comment. The people keep writing, and I'm losing my place. So I can't pronounce this word. Thomas says, if you want to see the cringy extent of the traditional Roman religion, look at Palmarians. It's so cringy, but is the logical extent of their rubbish. Could you explain to us what he's talking about? Because I really don't know.
Sure. Palmarians, and this is why I said he kind of skipped ahead, because you really have to go past the 60s. You're talking about a group centered in Palmar de Troya, Spain, where a priest became convinced, and let me see if I could I don't want to get my information wrong on this, but it kind of started in 1978, where the guy claimed he had a vision of the Mother of God who declared him Pope. And so, they have their own Pope in Spain, in Palmar de Troya. And so basically, they've been holding that the See of Rome has been transferred since 1978 to the See of Palmar de Troya. In some ways, you could say that they were the first rival claimants, although there was another one who formed the Apostles of Divine Love in Canada through another vision of the Mother of God. I guess she just likes assigning popes all over the place now. But the real conclavist movement, which we'll get into later, is a little bit after that. It really starts with Archbishop Nyoting-Tuk. So
you know what? Let's get us into what led into Vatican II. Why did it turn out the way it did? Why did it upend the traditional Roman Catholic religion, which, as you were already demonstrating, was already quite a bit fallen away since the beginning of the 1900s?
Well, one of the things that I do want to stress is that the changes that were occurring in Roman Catholicism were largely generational. And so it may not have been as noticeable to the people in the pews. Sure, Grandma lost her Latin Bible, but eventually Mom bought one of the new ones.
For my grandfather, may I add, he used to sell them for $100 each.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's a quite nice Bible, actually.
Okay. Is it which one? What is it? What kind is it?
I probably actually have it in a box or something somewhere. It's in English. It's got very liberal study notes. The book of Genesis is all an allegory. The scriptures of contradiction. So it has study notes.
Is it translated from? Do you remember if it's translated from the Latin or from the Greek? Because if it's translated from the Latin, my guess would be it's a Confraternity Due, which was kind of like the semi-standard before the New American Bible, which was Latin, but with all the liberal footnotes in it.
I can't remember. It's got to be pretty old if he was selling. It's got to be from the 60s. So
it could, it very well could have been, because the New American Bible didn't come out, I think, until 81.
It's dark red. It's got gold, but I'm sure there's a billion different ones out there. So
yeah,
we'll have to get back to you on that. So let's get into Vatican II.
Okay, so once we get to Vatican II, ultimately all of these trends that had been occurring, especially political ones, and even some of the religious ones, over the changes over time. One thing to remember is that, like, with the abolition of things like the Black Fast, these things had to be done diocese by diocese. People had to ask to change it. People had to ask to change that. You've heard, I'm sure, of the Saturday Mass in Roman Catholicism. This comes from the fact that at times people couldn't arrive, and so could the priest do a Vesperal Mass, which is what it was supposed to be. And so eventually these little minute details and accretions, they became kind of heavy, because it was like there's tons of legalese for the diocese of, the diocese of who cares. It's just tiny little place out of nowhere suddenly has mounds and mounds of legal regulations so that people don't have to do things like fast, or they can go to Mass on Saturday, so on and so forth. So the changes were there, but they were so heavily legislated that was one big part of the push for Vatican II. And the other one was ultimately that since the Roman Catholic Church had been developing a much more public position over the early part of the 1900s, they felt like they had to say something to the modern world. And I think that was the danger of it, that really they were not addressing a danger within Roman Catholicism. They had been trying to do that with the fight against modernism, etc. But in reality, there was no actual purpose behind Vatican II except to just bring a bunch of bishops together, and that's where everything kind of exploded. And so...
Now, was it in response to declining church attendance? They were trying, well, Protestantism seems like a little bit easier. Let's make things more Protestant. Was this almost a sort of self-evisceration of sorts, with people almost losing faith in their own traditions and norms in the wake of World War II? They go, well, it looks like almost God has forsaken us. It's a very traumatic course of events in World War II. And so then Vatican II is sort of leaving behind what people felt had failed them. I mean, what's the real impetus behind Vatican II?
Well, that's, in my opinion, and this is, again, this is just my opinion here, it appears to me that Catholics, in response to the modern world, might have felt, and I know this is going to sound, I'm trying to say this without being too rude about it, but I think a lot of them, and I hear this expression come from liberals as well as conservatives who were back, old, of age back then, etc., that they felt out of step with the rest of the world. And now, granted, as Christians, we're not supposed to be in step with the world, but that's exactly what I think a lot of people were feeling, and I think that that's really what kind of the spirit that they brought to the council, which is obviously not a Christian spirit, it's an earthly spirit, but unfortunately that would produce the results that we see with Vatican II. Some of those were not immediate. For example, people assume the new Mass, for example, was created at Vatican II. It wasn't. It was created in 1970, a few years later. But the point is, they did redo all of the rituals. They redid the ritual of baptism. This is all a product of Vatican II. What Vatican II did was it established the foundation for what the Roman Catholic Church would be. But with everything eviscerated from it, including tradition itself, all that really left was the papacy, and everything else was up for grabs. And so this is where you get into kind of an issue. Well, how does the papacy react to the rest of the world? And so for the first time we start, at first we dealt with this with Father Feeney, and his excommunication, but we start seeing that the Roman Catholic Church is kind of like, well, we have to kind of start accepting other people, and then they just went full scale in Vatican II to include like the Jews and Islam and take out, apparently we offended the Jews with the Holy Friday prayers, let's take them out, stuff like that. Like they really just were like, let's clean this up. But what they effectively did was, they eviscerated themselves, but I really believe it was not on purpose.
Okay. So it wasn't on purpose, and they're just using worldly tactics to try to deal with a worldly problem, and not the degree of cynicism which I think exists in the West today, which probably makes sense. So, all right. So in the wake of Vatican II, what happens? What happens to the Roman Catholic Church? I mean, where I look, Roman Catholic churches look pretty strong, especially compared to Orthodox. So what really, keeping that perspective, what really happens to these Roman Catholic churches in the wake of Vatican II?
Well, I know this is going to surprise you, but in fact, as big as they look now, they actually looked a lot bigger. like mass attendance between the 70s and 80s actually dropped something like, I think it was like 35%. So you're seeing a huge flow of people who would eventually, grow up and teach their kids to become like the nuns, the NONE, the no set religion sort of people. These people had kind of wafted away and were kind of gone. So that just says how strong the Roman Catholic Church was back then. Now, granted, Orthodoxy was stronger to some degree back then too, because unfortunately, modernism and ecumenism tend to cause people to leave churches. If your church teaching...
Yeah, it's the worst business decision ever, right?
Yeah.
You get all these punk kids in college and high school like, oh, man, it's all about the money. If they're about the money, they'd be making way smarter decisions than what they're making. These people are very deluded.
Well,
at least from a business standpoint.
Well, if you're looking at the business as the customers being the parishioner, you'd be right. But I think in the case, especially with a lot of the later and modernists and ecumenists, the Fortimites, etc., the real customer isn't the parishioner, it's the state. And so, if you look at like the whole, I see that there's a lot of discussion about Constantinople and old calendarists in the chat, but just as an example, with the formation of the OCU, there was lots of money involved in that, and the State Department was part of that, and they're kind of backing Ukraine on that because they want to antagonize Russia. So the point is, and I don't think that this is the belief of, say, like the people in the Moscow Patriarchate or in the Row Corps. They seem to be focused on their parishioners. So when you're focused on your parishioners, ecumenism is a terrible business model. But when you're focused on nation states and their money, then it's a great business model, even if it empties out the church.
And also then they kick your butt to the curb because you're useless, because now you don't have any meat, you don't have no one behind you anymore. Mm-hmm. But let me read this comment. It says, because it's on liberalism, I'm on my last thread with the OCA, he says. Remember, this is one individual's comment. It's not necessarily the comment of Deacon Joseph or myself. Because of their Covidianism and East German style way of dealing with laity, I'm moving to the Greeks because it's the only other option. I wish there were a Row Corps, but I'll take my chances.
May I mention that one of the articles I'm going to be putting on NFTU tonight actually was from an archpriest.
What is NFTU, by the way?
Oh, NFTU is the True Orthodox and Ecumenical news site I've been running since 2004. It's been around.
I don't know that. I guess I'm not paying attention. So
yeah, that's okay. A lot of people don't. But it has its share of followers. But there was a new article where a priest of the Moscow Patriarchate, high-ranking archpriest, actually wrote down, and this was like a day and a half ago, that Constantinople and Alexandria's actions are schismatic and heretical. And I'm bringing this up because I will be putting these news articles up in the next couple of days for those who are following this stuff. The Moscow Patriarchate is having a synod meeting in November to formally declare Constantinople schismatic. This is not conspiracy theory. It's right there on the DECR's website, the Department of External Church Relations. So this is a real thing. So if I understand the OCA can be frustrating, I don't know that I would suggest the Greek Archdiocese, if only because of the fact that may be jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Especially, I don't know what December is going to look like. That's how weird things are going.
And the OCA, though they're autokephalists, they're really treated by the Orthodox world as being part of the Moscow Patriarchate ultimately. So they're tethered to them. And so I will say this, because he mentioned East German. All right. So guys, this is a real East German hat. All right. This is the real thing. Let me see so people know it's not like the Nazi eagle with anything. See that? It's the hammer, sickle, and the weird other thing, the East German symbol. So there you go, real East German hat. So I am approved by your Covidian overlords. So that being said, let's get back into Vatican II. So does this, you say, well, there's less because people, there's less reason to go. It's less special, right? There's an appeal in what's not common, right? Well, so they start losing numbers. But how about groups like SSPX and schisms? What occurs in that department?
Right. Now, right after if I'm going to just pull up the history of the SSPX, because I think it actually slightly predates the council, but it may not. It may be actually after. So it was 1970. So it was founded basically the year the new Mass was introduced. The new Mass basically, if you're familiar with the Tridentine Mass or the old Roman Mass, basically what they did is they took out a lot of the elements of the Mass and they changed the Eucharistic prayers somewhat. But since it's in Latin anyway, most people wouldn't notice until it's in the vernacular. The idea was to simplify the Mass, but they simplified it with virtually no guidelines. So at the same time that Marcel Lefebvre, the Archbishop who began the Society of St. Pius X, which is what the SSPX is, he begins, trying to create a seminary for just people doing the Latin Mass. And effectively, this is happening at the same time that they're tearing down altars in Roman Catholic churches to make the altars look more like tables. They also begin to, explore changing the music, and from this they begin to borrow a lot of music from Protestantism. But during the 70s, when this Mass was first promulgated, there were virtually no directives. So what would happen would be priests would wonder, well, technically, it just says it needs bread and wine. Does Boone's Farm count as wine? Does an Oreo cookie count as bread? And I hate to say this, but I actually knew people who actually had Boone's Farm and Oreo masses. This was a real thing because their minds had been completely lost. You could do whatever you wanted, and so chaos began. This is also the period where you start seeing the clown masses. So it's a given that the Society of St. Pius X would take off like a rocket because everyone's like,
wait, someone say clown. It's hard when it's like I'm not looking in a mirror. So there you go. We're going to be using the props later. People want, but yeah, it's the clown masses. I mean, well, let's talk about this clown masses for a second. I mean, it seems to me a stick that people beat the Roman Catholics with, but they're not common, right? So you got a few nuts that do nutty stuff, but why is it really a big deal? It doesn't really exist anywhere.
Well, to some degree it still exists. You still find like they try to make the mass more contemporary. You'll see Barney, you'll see all sorts of weird characters, and they do goofy things. Liturgical dance is still a thing.
Where I love you and you love me.
Yeah, I know, but why is there a big purple dinosaur on the altar? The point is, there's no way to answer that, Craig. Unless we're going back to the whole thing about reinterpreting Genesis.
For the Zoomers watching, Barney is a 90s children's show. Just so you know, look it up on YouTube. We're not making it up.
But while this is occurring, even on the BBC, there were sketch comedies making fun of priests trying to be more relevant and more contemporary. And so the point is, it got ridiculous. And it continued into the 80s. And the worst part of it is, much as we can disagree or agree on Roman Catholic art and architecture up until, the 1900s, they were literally... That's a funny comment. That reminds me of another story. No.
All right, finish the comment, then you got to tell the story about Barney.
All right. Well, okay. Yeah. Okay. The story is very simple. No, not about Barney. About what Zala Seraphim wrote there, because. There was just this one time I was in a church, I think it was an Antiochian church, and there was a lady who was well known. She liked to gossip and chat a lot, and sometimes the priest would have to tell her to be quiet in church. But in any case, it was the Feast of St. George. They had this big icon of St. George, and a friend of mine was behind this lady, and everyone's going up to kiss the icon, and then what's it called? They get to the the icon. This lady gets to the icon, and then my friend kind of whispers over to her, and he's just like, you're supposed to kiss St. George, not the dragon.
That's a good. I've noticed that the way I've been taught to venerate icons is you try to kiss their hands or their feet, and
right, but you kiss the dragon instead.
Yeah, well, because the idea is like you don't know the saint that well that you kiss him on the face, right? So yeah. That's how I try to teach my son as well. But it's an interesting thing. You'll see the marks of people's lips and where they're kissing the icons, and they're all over the place.
Yeah, then the poor priest you're saying to have to wipe
the issue of Vatican II, and it was going to clown masses and all that stuff.
Yeah. Now Jesus points out clown masses are just the end of the spectrum. There's all kinds of wild stuff going on in RC masses nowadays, and it's all based on the idea of trying to make the liturgy as we would know it, the liturgy of all ages, contemporary. So it's no longer the liturgy of all ages, it's the liturgy of the current age. And so the faddism that I mentioned had begun in the early 1900s had now reached every aspect of Roman Catholicism, including the Mass, which is part of the reason why so many people fled to groups like Marcel Lefebvre, with the Society of St. Pius V, which then, this gets confusing. You have the Society of St. Pius X. Then a group breaks away in the 80s called the Society of St. Pius V. These people are starting to doubt that there's actually a pope in Rome. And so this is when, why are most clown masses in Brazil? Estamos envergonado, gente. Envergonando. I'm telling you, I don't know. I do not know that. But yeah, it is it's the problem is that we're going to keep seeing this. When I was in college, right before I had become Orthodox, they advertised the football season masses. So these were masses where you had to wear your preferred NFL jersey. I have no idea why you had to like the NFL. I'm a soccer fan. I had no interest in it whatsoever, but I just felt like to me, it had gotten to the point where
Buffalo Bill's gone all the way this year.
yeah, well, to me, it had got. How many times have we heard this? Anyway, the point is that, you know, I started to wonder if the NFL like kind of like snuck some money into the church there, just advertise the games, and so like the mass would be on before the game, so that way nobody missed it. Like the whole thing was ridiculous. Just the amount of pandering that was done for whatever advertising or you know. So anyway, the point is, at this point, going back to the 80s, we now have, you know, the Society of St. Pius X making a bunch of effectively quasi-legal Latin masses, trying to just hold things together. It's not working out too well. The Society of St. Pius V comes. We don't know if there's a pope. And this is when conclavism begins. And conclavism, did somebody just ask what episodes of Barney do you recommend? None. Watch Yo Gabba Gabba. Don't punish your kids like that.
Well, I said the ones that they teach you how to share, of course.
That's all of them. And so we get to conclavism, and conclavism is the belief that a new conclave must be held to elect the new pope. And so there have been a few of these claimants to the papacy, the most famous one being mentioned in the chat there as Pope Michael. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Pope Michael.
No.
If you did, if you look up his image, you will notice, if you look for young, you know, like a young Pope Michael, you will see a very startling familiar similarity to a certain actor.
Jude Law.
That is correct.
Oh, no,
I think the idea was, because remember that the young pope was actually written by a liberal Roman Catholic. And so when he created the young pope, he created him to be a villain. He had no idea that so many people would find him a hero because they hated the real pope that much that they were like, this guy's even better. And so the joke is, if Pope Michael is obviously not the pope, but he plays a great one on TV. And so, the thing is, so we get to that one. There was the one that before that, there was not before that, after that, which was Lucian Pulvermacher, who I believe he declared himself Benedict XIV. That was around when I first converted to Orthodoxy. That guy, and that guy actually, in both cases, obviously, like Pope Michael was elected by like 6 people, including his mom and dad, and like Pope Pius XIII was elected by a bunch of people online. I think it was like 20 people. None of these people were obviously bishops. So you have the immediate problem that you are now electing the Bishop of Rome with no bishops. So this became a thing where kind of like I don't know what Pope Michael's solution was, but I remember Lucian Pulvermacher wrote it was so beautifully legalistic in its papism. Like it was like all of the extraordinary powers are in the Pope. So now that we have a Pope, we can now have the Pope make a bishop who can then make the Pope a bishop.
Alrighty then. So before we bring this into the modern day, why the online apologetics world's on fire with traditionalism and what's the deal with SEDS today and whatnot, let's take a well-earned meme break. All right. So we're gonna take a meme break. All right. Let's see. Discord is not the best means of sharing memes. All right, so it says, when you declare Vatican II to be a false council and all subsequent popes to be heretics, but fail to realize that if Vatican II is false, then so is every cardinal who's alive right now, since they all are appointed by a post-Vatican II pope. So according to your worldview, they're all illegitimate cardinals. But that means that the church is left without a pope forever because there's no legitimate cardinal to elect one, which means that the church is over, which directly contradicts Matthew 16:18. There you go. There's said smiley guy.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, first off, I find that meme sufficiently spicy. But more importantly, the argument I've seen adduced by many of these groups is that basically when there are no obvious real cardinals, then the cardinals can be elected by any group of faithful Catholics surviving. So you can just make your own cardinals. So once you can make your own cardinals, then you can just make your own pope. So
it sounds like a children's toy. It comes with like a little vial of oil and like, fake hats and stuff, and they could play dress up.
Yeah, well, and that's ultimately what a lot of it is. It reminds me of the joke I once heard about old Catholicism, and somebody said Roman Catholics now put a kitchen table in the center of their cathedrals, whereas old Catholics have a Baroque altar in their kitchens.
Now, sharing memes, never good to have, like, you got to read a book to read a meme. So I don't like this meme.
I'm not a fan of that meme. It's two text meme.
We have to, memes have to convey encyclopedic knowledge in an image in like 3 words. All right, so here we go. Pope Francis has endorsed the universal basic income. COVID-19 could make it a reality in Europe. It's not a meme, it's just a headline. Guys, where are the spicy memes? All right, Deacon Joseph made a great one. All right, we got Jay Dyer here. Let's see. He's a chaos mathematician, flooded with messages. All right, computer work. Jay Dyer's breaking my computer. It's not working. And comments on Roman Catholics acquiring Orthodoxy and leaving Rome. Well, okay, it's both old. This is July 19, 2021. But also, where's the joke in this? Is there a punchline? I'm missing this. Is there a subtle irony I don't understand?
I feel like it's just more the go team sort of thing, just
go team. Yeah. Well, I'm looking to be amused. My team's already won. So I'm looking to be amused at this point. Let's see. Here we go. Francis is precursor to the Antichrist, clearly. Yes. Oh, no. Here comes Vatican II loyalists. We gutted the liturgy before. It's fine this time, too. Submit to Rome. Yeah, that's disgusting. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Looks gross for me.
Although, in that sense, the author, even though he chose some pretty gross picture, is not wrong. The original revision of Trent actually caused a lot of local Western liturgies to be suppressed because of the fact that they had to prove an unbroken lineage of 200 years and so on and so forth. It was so like if there were any that they physically suppressed previously, they couldn't be used after Trent. So Trent also took out a lot of things. Which you can actually see the remnants of when you look at a Tridentine Mass. I've mentioned this before, for example, the sequences. I believe in the Tridentine Mass there are 4 of them, whereas in the old Roman Mass there used to be one for virtually every week. There's books of sequences that from before the schism that are 100 sequences in length. So I think that's it's a good point. Let me see. Memes have to shrink a book to the size of a sentence while being funny. Okay, what's this meme about?
Oh, okay. Well, let's look at this meme. It says papism. All right, and they're on a boat, and I guess it's a bunch of waters and stuff.
Well, I think that's kind of funny because it's supposed to be the ship of Christ, but only one of them has Christ actually on it. The other one has this crying cardinal leaning there, and the Pope's on the side, like majestic. We're in the midst of a storm. Anyway.
Okay. So it makes a point.
Yeah, it makes a point. Not what do you call it? Spicy, but it's a good meme. I approve.
Meme. All right, this looks spicy already.
Oh yeah, that
all right. So let's look. Bigger. Guys, use more high-res pictures. Who's going to read this? So all right. So Christ had the church, 21 centuries of intact faith, tradition, beards, anti-Zionism, Byzantine chants, Mount Athos, Holy Fire, Orthodox schema monks, Vladimir Putin. And let's see, the Roman Catholics like big baby proselytism. I don't know why.
Big lobby. I think. Oh,
big lobby? Looks like big baby.
You can read about it.
I can't read this one. I can't read this one. I'm sorry. I'm throwing you under the bus. All right, here's one. And this one looks like it's got pretty good resolution. He's a man of unimpeachable faith. His manner of life is incomparably excellent. He stands at the head, so to say, of the whole body of the church, and all else are mere disjointed members. St. Basil the Great on the Patriarch of Antioch. There you go. That's pretty good.
That's not bad.
His face sells it, really. It's sort of like when there's a bad movie, but it all hinges upon the actor.
All right, I just whipped this one up. Feel free to share. Oh, boy.
Uh-oh. He whipped it up. All right, fresh off the meme press. Maybe this will be like one of those memes where it's an old one, but it still checks out. So let's see.
Who's the guy on the right? It looks like Abby Hoffman, or like the guy from Breaking Bad or something. Wearing
Vatican I Council. The Pope is the infallible super emperor of the world. 100 years later, Vatican II Council. Hey man, just chill. God create all the religions, dude. Just ignore all the contradictions. The second commandment is bigoted, man. There you go. So let's see what that. He tried.
That was not bad. He tried very hard.
This one's a little meta. This sounds like you need to be smart to get it. That's problematic. Constant prayer, sharing the gospel, reasoning from the scriptures, condemning actions of the Catholic Church from throughout history, posting dank anti-papist memes, yelling, "We affirm against the papacy." There you go. So a little bit there. Okay. I'm still waiting for a meme to just hit the right, just hit the spot. You know, sometimes you're just starving just for the right meme, and we're not getting it. So anyway, we will continue, and people can keep sharing their memes on Discord. Guys, we really haven't just even started yet. I got a whole sorts of material. What we're going to get into, these hats, they're waiting to be used. So that being said, let's get into the modern day. Where are we left with now? What is the field in Roman Catholicism, and where does traditionalism fit in? And is there real traditionalism anymore?
It's hard to say that there is. I mean, with the recent decisions in the Vatican concerning the use of the Latin Mass, where basically just shut it down. I think it's the latest thing was Custodius Traditione or something like that. Is the latest papal decree on it, where he basically restricts the use of it. Effectively, it's forced most Roman Catholics that are faithful to whatever traditions they have left out into the fringes. Whereas they could have gone to the SSPX and then maybe gone to a local Roman Catholic Latin Mass. That option is disappearing. And so ultimately, they're considered almost very close to schismatics in their own church. And it's kind of a sad thing when you think about it. I kind of feel bad for them, because the truth of the matter is they're just trying to, they were taught usually from childhood that this is supposed to be the true Church of Christ. And instead they find that the person who's heading the allegedly the true Church of Christ is causing people to lose faith left and right. It's painful to watch. And, it was funny when I first thought of the idea, but I mean, I think back now, especially this past week has been kind of a learning experience for me. And I don't know how much I should go into it. But one thing that did happen is I was reminded of my own past when I was a teenage Roman Catholic, and how deeply modernism was part of the church even then. And the point is, when people would ask, "Are Catholics Christians?" I was shocked that people wondered about that. But the point is that when it comes right down to it, I think once you get to that traditionalist wing, and I never got to that traditionalist wing. I was part of the diocesan, Roman Catholic Church before I became Orthodox. I don't know what exactly a traditionalist is to do now. In Roman Catholicism, the center of the Roman Catholic Church's teaching is the papacy. And effectively, they've gutted almost everything else. They've gutted the tradition. And now the Pope is turning on the few things that these people take seriously, like the Sunday service that they go to. And I feel horrible for them. So when I see, like when you pointed to the Jay Dyer clip that he's getting thousands of people who are asking, I don't doubt it. I do not doubt it 1 second, because these people are terrified. But as many have pointed out, they have to get over the idea that the Pope is the center of the church. It is a foundational belief, especially of Roman Catholicism after the 18th century, and it is a destructive one. And the fruits of it are visible now.
Now, someone made this comment. Craig has a ton of messages waiting for him in that other Discord server. Could we get any more specific? Are there more memes somewhere? Or is it in Jay Dyer's Discord? Is it in a different part of my Discord? Go to the general part of the Discord linked here. Just go to general, post in there. Or Roman Catholic. That's where I'm looking. But that being said, I want to ask this. I've noticed this. There's certain traditional Roman Catholics and they're the Seds, and they're all over the place because there's a million different splinter groups of that, and they're hard to think in a way that's actually serious. So when I think of traditional Roman Catholics, I think of those that go to Latin masses, that believe what the fathers say really is the teaching of the church, and would otherwise approach things mostly like Orthodox. I would say wrongly, because there's no way one could be consistent and then hold to their claims. And I think with increased exposure and information, now traditionalism has evolved, and I'm going to make it up, though someone else might have had the word before, into neo-tradism, right? And so I would say the Eric Yabaras, the Mike Loftons, the Reason in Theology, when they get exposed to orthodoxy, now all of a sudden you can't just say we follow teaching the fathers, because that doesn't work, because Roman Catholicism is inconsistent with most teaching the fathers and the points in which they're in dispute with the Orthodox. And so neo-tradism is the desire to have what, the Jude law, so to say, and we're going to get into this, is the desire to have the traditional Pope and traditional Roman Catholicism. But because it's not tenable, it then uses the clown Pope or the modernist apologetics, modernist view of the fathers. Oh, well, certain fathers are wrong. Manuscripts that we have what the fathers say don't really say that, and things like that. And so you get this sort of mutant, which is really modernist because its methodology is modernist, even if its intent and its in its heart of hearts wants to be traditional. It's so obviously modernist, which is why I don't feel comfortable calling it traditional. So,
I have some thoughts on that. Granted, now having been, previously a Roman Catholic and having analyzed this stuff, my view is a little bit darker. And what I mean by that is,
they're just in it for the money.
Huh? No. Not everyone anyway. But the point is, I would say that what you're referring to as kind of Roman Catholic traditionalism really should be called Baroque traditionalism. And what I mean by that is that in Roman Catholicism before Vatican II, etc., there were still loads of visions. There were still loads of crazy devotions, ideas that were not approached like any Orthodox would approach it. We tend to approach things with kind of a sobriety, whereas even G.K. Chesterton noted the crazed looks on the statues, indicating how fervent they were for their faith, which to us would be horrifying in terms of using an iconography, but to him was a proof of the truth of Catholicism. The craziness of Baroque Christianity was what sold it. So in that sense, I would say that people like after Vatican II, especially now, in the information era where we can see patristic manuscripts, we have the entire Patrologia Latina and Gracia and Mansi online for free. We can analyze and investigate things. The Roman Catholic apologetics, especially the stuff like what Eric Ibarra does, relies on what Joseph Overbeck called patristic storehouses. They're like books like Jurgens, or in Dom John Chapman is a particular favorite for Scott Butler, and now Eric's using him, where they take snippets of the fathers, lots and lots of snippets, and they basically read those so they have them kind of memorized. Post-Vatican II thinking, however, has poisoned that well. So even those patristic storehouses can no longer really be trusted. In that sense, I would say that, the Loftons, the Ibarras, all these Pints of the Aquinas, they're what you would call post-traditionalists, because they deeply know that what they're selling, their own church doesn't believe anymore. But they have to, because it's the only way that they can feel better and not think about the kumbaya masses, not think about, the madness that's going on, the destruction of their liturgies, the exposure of the sex crimes, etc., in the Roman Catholic Church in the past 20 years worldwide. It's easier and it's a coping mechanism, and I genuinely know and feel for these people because I know how much it hurts. If you I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Skojak.
I've heard the name, but I don't. Nothing really.
He ran a website called 1 Peter 5.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah. And so recently he kind of has gotten, he is the picture of the post-traditionalist Roman Catholic apologist. He gave up on it. He sold the website. Basically, he had gotten so spiritually and mentally abused by the clergy that he had dealt with for decades, that he just said, I'm giving up on this thing. And he gave up because a priest, for no reason, apparently with COVID regulations, told him his infant couldn't be baptized or something. And that's insane. Like, the point is that when you start hearing these horror stories, I really see, what Michael Lofton and Ibarra and so on and so forth are doing is just desperately trying to stay sane. Because their world is insane. And so in some sense, I would think the conclavists, the followers of Pope Michael, the SSPV people, even the SSPX people who have already gotten used to being called every name in the book, they're just happy they're still there. But for, the people who are trying to just make it an institutional Roman Catholicism today, I feel sorry for them. It's horrible, especially when the person you're supposed to trust the most, which is the Pope, becomes like this.
Now, I'm going to get more into what I find wrong with, you're saying post-traditional, post-trad. That's probably a better word than neo-trad. So anyway, this post-trad apologetics.
I like that because it reminds me of a new word that's been coined, which is doomerism. And that's really what I kind of see it as. It's Catholic doomerism. And yeah, some people are monetizing it, but I believe that they genuinely also believe it. It's the only thing they can do.
Well, yeah, that's a good point too. Like, a big thing in my own channel is I'm aware of liberalism within Orthodoxy. I don't try to scotch the issue, but I don't try to touch hot-button issues. If all I wanted to do was just raise money or whatever, then you talk about Constantinople and Moscow. You talk about the liberalism. You talk about Fordham. If you notice, like I generally don't talk about these topics. I don't ignore them entirely, but I generally don't talk about them because it doesn't edify anyone, right? People already know it's a problem. I don't need to pontificate about it just to get attention. And so like this sort of doomerism, as you put it, is what the whole Roman Catholic YouTube world is all about because it gets people to click.
Well, I think
it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't actually, all it does is make clear to people to either be cynical and just give up on Christianity or to adopt this very odd post-trad worldview, which as we're going to unfold a little bit, it's not tenable. So let me give you a comment. We'll take a meme break, and then I'm going to start into some of my play acting.
Sounds good.
So no comment. We're going to go right to memes.
Oh, no, I had a comment on that, actually. And what I think that when you see RC apologists trying to bring up things like Constantinople versus Moscow, etc., you're right. They are trying to say the world is worse. Again, I hate to say this, but this comes from this concept of invincible ignorance in Roman Catholicism, which is if the only religion that could possibly be true upon reflection must be Roman Catholicism. This is kind of a twisted cousin of that thinking, because what this is saying is, look how horrible the rest of the world is. If you can't stay Roman Catholic here, you may as well give up. And that's the point where I think people like Steve Skojak actually reached. And that's terrifying, that people have put so much faith in the papacy and in the institution, they've forgotten the name of Jesus Christ.
Well, that's the thing. I've spoke to more than one post-trad. It's going to go with the word. More than one post-trad that said, if the papacy weren't true, I couldn't even be a Christian. And we talked about this in your stream a month or so ago, right? Yeah. And that blows my mind. I mean, so you don't love Christ anymore because some guy failed you, or some epistemology behind some human being failed you? To me, that blows my mind. That is so fundamentally unchristian. And so may God have mercy on those who struggle with that, because it's extremely, extremely common. So right before the memes, we got a question. Now that Pope Francis has oppressed the Latin Mass, what do you think will happen to other Latin Mass-oriented communities like the Institute of Christ the King, among others? What say you, Deacon Joseph? Because I have no clue.
Well, the Institute of Christ the King, like the Fraternity of Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, these are groups that formed after John Paul II excommunicated Marcel Lefebvre before his death. And basically, John Paul II instituted these groups that would be official Latin Mass centers where they could do what was known as the indult Mass, or a Mass by permission of the local bishop, so they could do Latin Masses. Ultimately, what this has done is it's forcing them now into a position they were trying to avoid to begin with. I believe it was the Fraternity of St. Peter's head who said, we literally formed this fraternity to do the Latin Mass in obedience to Rome, and you're forcing us to now make a decision where we have to abandon it or leave. And that's a horrifying thought, but that's really where they're at right now. And their choices, Francis has made it clear, you're either going to get with the program and get off the Latin Mass, go back to everything else, be like all the other Roman Catholics and fall in line, or you're going to go into schism. And one New York Times reporter actually noted this and said that Francis, in the name of liberalism, is weaponizing the papacy in a way that hasn't been seen in decades, that hasn't been seen since the popes were screaming like, this is the one true church, the only way, and you'll be burned at the stake if you don't agree. He's using those same tools to advance liberalism. So it's very, very I would hate to be in their position. I would tell them to become Orthodox, but I would tell them probably go get married first, because sometimes you just got to start over in life.
Okie dokie. So there you go. So we have this question, and I'm not exactly sure. Craig, what do you think about what's AFR and Father Damick?
The AFR is Ancient Faith Radio, and that's Father Andrew Stephen Damick. There's been a controversy, which I think may end up on NFTU, may not. There's so much going on now in terms of news.
Is this the Abbot Tryphon?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Long story short, Father Damick has done some good apologetics. I wouldn't say it's like super ultra high level, but it's high enough level for really his audience, which is the point, right? I think my limitation as presenter is I'm looking to best myself. I could sort of care less about everyone else, which is bad. It's selfish. So I have nothing negative to say about it. I met him once, actually. Does it appear political without looking that close to it? It does. Right? Because it seems like other people get to say things that are pro-COVIDian and whatnot, and no hammer comes down on them. I think it was on Ancient Faith Radio. They pretty much had a response to the video I did with myself and Father Peter Hears, where all I did is conduct an interview. He gave all the answers. And they did this response, and in the response, they pretty much say, he's just in it, these people are just in it for the money and whatnot, but we're not naming any individuals, and it's very passive aggressive. So the point is, it's inconsistent not to be political. How about just go out there and say where you really come from or what you really feel? And so
I think it's complicated by the fact that it's complicated by the problem that the entire media is having. And AFR, whether we like it or not, is media. It has its own board, it has its own controllers, it is answerable to someone. In this, Father Stephen Damick is only a part of the issue. He's a cog in the machine. So in a sense, even though he is a very important part of it, it's not all his fault. Somebody else complained. And what it comes down to is there are certain things that are beyond his control, and it's a media organization. Therefore,
I've worked in media.
Yeah, and so you know that
sponsors. So it's free. A stupid company, you would give $100 for a crappy flashlight, and you can never say anything negative about this crappy flashlight. They'll scotch everything over the $100. In fact, if there's an advertiser that it's a prospective advertiser, they haven't been given money, they'll bend over backwards for those people.
Yeah,
and so whenever there's a lot of money involved with, or the potential for money with a media organization, they will bend over backwards to whatever they want. And so
remember Hank Hanegraaff?
Dawn 2, the Chinese returned the 2 North Koreans because it was over the money, right? There's no American movies don't go to North Korea, but they go to China. And so for what people understand is for practically nothing, our free discourse is being subverted. It's not like you don't really need a massive conspiracy. I know people can disagree. Most people are conspiracy theorists, but you don't really need a massive conspiracy. It takes very little money. And so I think that a lot of this is just, oh, we're not going to publish this, or we're not going to act because this offended 2 people. And this will blow people's minds, but I've seen it. Radical decisions which control free discourse are made over practically no money, but it does happen.
Because of the perception that there might be money there. And this is a big problem, and this is part of the reason why independent media, and for all intents and purposes, what we do is independent media, is effectively we controvert the narrative. What Abbot Trifon was doing was speaking the controversial, or should I say, he was saying things that were against the official narrative, and that became a danger to, for lack of a better word, the shareholders. So that's part of the reason why that happened. So, it's just sad. And hopefully he gets a channel on someplace else, like Rumble or something, and does it there.
Well, and money, why, and there's money's why there's doomerism and whatnot. And one thing I've always appreciated about your channel is it's not about the money. And so you really just get content for what it is. It's not driven by these market forces that determine what shape it should take, what should be communicated. So, and I'd like to say, I hope my channel does the same. So anyhow, what is your take on Malachi Martin and the third secret nonsense?
I'm going to be honest. I have not read much of Malachi Martin. I know that he is very popular in Roman Catholic traditionalist circles. My former metropolitan actually did know him as a Jesuit because he was a former Jesuit, and so was Malachi Martin. And so he actually was, honestly, I think a lot of it is just, I think he was a very good analyst. He was able to see that there were underlying forces at work in, the Second Vatican Council and afterwards, but there was little he could do about it. And he would just be brushed off like a conspiracy theorist like everyone else.
All right. We have a comment here, and I lost it, from JG. When people say trad, why did they not include the destruction of usury and do no dealings with the Jews? Now, I'm not quite sure. I presume he needs to speak about banking in general. You'd have to turn off this channel if you're against everyone who's ethnically Jewish. I'm half Ashkenazi Jew. But we do have a video on why usury is wrong on this channel. And I have to say, and we talked about this in the usury video, it seems to be a topic that people just have popularly capitulated upon, but no saint approves of usury. And the scriptures obviously are so uniformly against usury. And so all I can think of is what St. Augustine said. There's a real danger of living in a time where what is sinful is seen as virtuous and people will approve of the sin. And I think usury has certainly hit that level.
Well, I mean, I tend to see, as one, I've spoken on my channel with Bishop Enoch, we've spoken on Judaism and things like this. The simple reality is, for me, and I've noticed this, especially among some people who call themselves traditionalists, there's this big push about the Jews. And I sort of get it, but eventually what happens is it becomes a religion by itself. Eventually saying the Jew, the Jew, the Jew, the Jew becomes a religion on its own. And it's kind of, it's not worth it. Is it right to mention things that have happened in history between Jews and Christians? Of course it is. And things that happen with Jewish converts. But the point is, what we can't do, we can't focus on that alone, especially since that is going, there's the question of the Antichrist in Israel. Okay, that's fine. But even then, the fathers say that a significant number of the Jews will convert when they realize he's not the real Messiah. So I wonder how...
Which is interesting, because Father Daniel Sazoy is emphatic on that point in his commentary in Revelation, that there'll be a mass conversion of Jews. Things St. John Chrysostom said the same. It's very common in the fathers.
That's a patristic teaching. And so this weird focus, which I think, it kind of comes from the disillusionment of many people who had this particular dislike for their own reasons, combined with the anti-Semitism that we see rising with the rise of Islam in Western nations. I think that these things are tied together. Unfortunately, what they're tied together in does not look like orthodoxy to me. It looks like obsession that's unnecessary. As for banks, just use a bank that doesn't charge interest. I mean, they exist. It's the point is, granted, now you might lose access to Visa. This is a scary thing. We live in an era where we're of deplatforming, where people can literally be depersoned,
unpersoned,
unpersoned, their Facebook, all their stuff taken away, their bank accounts shut down. We've seen this. And that should scare us more than any perceived threat of a group of people, because they don't necessarily always intersect. And we have to be concerned with threats to our own health, safety, and salvation. All right,
we're getting too serious. Let's get to memes. So, so that being said, we got some memes. Let's evaluate these memes. What if I call myself above the emperor and promote forgeries to defend my position? I just love creating civil wars in Germany and Italy. Well, that sounds like something a pope would do. What do you think?
Well, that's Hildebrand, basically, in a nutshell. But I'm curious what came after the comma, but I guess nothing. But
he made it. It's called a typo. Here's this one. It's a meme where just all the bad headlines. Priest said he urinated in communion wine. Was it? Oh, that's disgusting. What comes down to, but there's wickedness in the Orthodox world as well. So that's why I never focus on that. If we want to get graphs or who's better, who's worse, maybe one group will come out worse than the next, but also you're going to get Protestant groups, you're going to get Mormons or whatever. You might get groups that are like Amish. They might end up being better than you. So I want to be careful not to pursue that.
I kind of go into a little more dangerous territory with that, simply because of the history of the Hildebrandian Revolution. In one of the episodes we did about who invented the Roman Catholic Church, when we talked about Hildebrand, he was being warned by other bishops that the people that he was associating with were well known as perverts. And unfortunately, their basic rule, and Ulrich of Imola wrote about this, that their basic thinking was that we were to present an image of purity while we could live a life completely debauched underneath, and that it would be okay. And so this was the mentality by the people who began enforcing celibacy. They didn't just enforce it on people. Some of them were, I hate to say this, were big homosexuals, and I hope I don't get this channel demonetized for that, but not demonetized, but you know what I'm saying. I hope you don't get booted off. They
weren't necessarily larger or smaller or wider or thinner people with homosexual tendencies, but they weren't bisexual. You were saying they were homosexual.
Well, they were. Well, really, back then the term was sexual deviant, because a person would do all sorts of horrible things, which I'm not going to go into. But we did cover some of that on the show, which was horrifying. And the point I'm trying to make is that was the cover. They created that for that cover, and what ended up happening was, the married priests would be removed. Their wives and children would be sold into slavery. This is a horrible period in the West, but this was the period that created the clerical celibacy, which would lead to the abuse scandal. It would be nice to believe, and Roman Catholic apologists will have you believe, that that the original ideal was that everybody would be like a monastic and holy, and that's the way it was, and it's only now that this perversion happened. People don't realize that during the period of the Inquisition, that one of the most common crimes was priests getting caught with boys, and that would actually, the inquisitors would have to go to the bishop, be like, this happened, and then they'd have to let them off with a light sentence.
Well, let me push back in two ways. Well, one, I asked my father, was there all this abuse back then when you grew up, in an Italian neighborhood in the Bronx? He said, no, the priest slept with the PTA ladies and stuff. So, it doesn't mean
he was straight.
So there's all sorts of sexual morality. We've had Orthodox bishops that have been disgraced because of their girlfriends. So there's always been that. And also, you read the Desert Fathers, they warn against, you shouldn't go to that skeet. There's too many young boys there. So this goes back, that's in Egypt, it's nowhere in the Western radar. So the point is, there's always been sexual deviancy, heterosexual, homosexual, all sorts of different stuff. And so I think fixating on it is itself a bit of a morbid curiosity.
Well,
I don't know. I don't get it.
Okay. First off, I will say from my experience in Roman Catholicism, I'm pretty sure I've never been abused by a priest. However, the simple reality is many more people, especially after these scandals came out, that I thought were not affected by it, were in fact affected by it. I remember the priest when I first started looking into the Western Rite. He ran an independent Mozarabic Rite church, and he would talk about, like, back in Colombia, how there was a young woman who hung around the priest's house all the time, and people just began referring to her as his niece, even though she was not in fact his niece. And one day, apparently, she decided she was not going to hang out at the church anymore, and she went and she got in a relationship with a man, and she ended up shot. And so everyone was like, the priest's niece is shot, and the police eventually determined that the priest, if I remember the story correctly, the priest actually killed her in a fit of jealous rage. So the point is that, yes, I agree, there has been perversion and sickness all over, the world. I mean, the life of Saint Mary of Egypt, we read during Lent, proves that. There's no doubt of that. But what I'm saying is that the forced institution, because, as St. Paul says, it's better to marry than to burn, by forcing all the clergy to be celibate, even if they weren't monastics, was a very, very dangerous place to go. And unfortunately, it produced results that are now just becoming really obvious. And even though it didn't affect everyone, it affected a lot of people.
Well, I'm not going to wax poetically about this, but someone says, I like the married priests of the Orthodox because they're more relatable, but doesn't it open the door to the women running the priests in the church? And I'd say, well, chances are that's happening more in the Latin Rite than in the Uniates, which have married priests. So I just think your premises are wrong. But look back to memes. This one looks interesting. Let's see. The main character, SpongeBob, lives inside a giant pineapple. How do you think he acquired that house? Through jihad. That's not even about the papacy. It's not even about the papacy.
It's still good. It's still a good meme, though.
All right, so let's see. It's fine, guys. Really, everything is going well, and we'll be able to reform the reform. Just wait. So I guess that's the post-trad right there.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's pretty good. That's fitting with the theme of this show. All right, so let's keep going. What's this? Can't tell. There is one monophysite among us, like Peter Mungus. Okay, I get it. That's pretty good. See, I laughed at that because you actually had to know some history to get that joke. All right. I'll go to bed soon. All right, let's see. I'll go to bed soon, 11:59 p.m. Why am I on Wikipedia reading about 5th and 6th century church history of the East? There you go. That's a good point. I'd say I try to stick by my bedtimes, and I'd say Friday nights because I do this the only time it gets, I get all freaked out, and I can't stick by my bedtime. So, we got this. Oh, this is a good one. Vatican I, Pope is super duper. 100 years later, Pachamama. There you go. Good old Pachamama. Pachamama, so fat, right? Let's see. Martin Luther. Any book of the Bible contradicts Martin Luther's man-made pseudo-Christian. What a dog. Good old dog. And how's your dog doing? I remember you said you got a new puppy. The dog's still eating up everything, destroying your shoes and stuff. Deacon Joseph.
Huh? Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I thought you were talking to the guy in the chat. No, my dog. It's not my dog. It's my wife's dog. I must clarify that it is not my dog. It's my wife's dog. But no, she's good.
Wait. So your wife. So do you have kids and your wife has kids? And even though they're produced by both of you, you lay claim to one or the other?
Well, it's different for the dog. She was a Mother's Day present.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not like I'm like, well, this is my son and this is your son. No, that would be a very strange household.
Okay. Oh, there you go. So anyway, when are you debating Deacon Joseph's wife's dog? You can't win a debate against a dog. They're always going to win. right?
The dog just never stopped talking. This one's never stops talking.
They'll outbark you.
Yeah.
All right, they'll outbark you. So that being said, now I get to start my sort of monologue,
Right.
and we'll use that as a leaping off talking about apologetics. And so the reason we did the show is I saw that picture, and the picture of the young pope and the clown pope, and it reminded me of this, which is Orthodox apologists, they're never debating one Roman Catholic apologist, right? Even if it's just one person, right? With this post-trad guy, they're debating two apologists, the young pope, and they're debating this guy, all right, and they're debating this guy, the post-modernist clown pope, all right. So they're debating two guys in one person, right? Now the former, right? He actually cares about tradition, the teaching, the scriptures, the saints. He views them as fundamentally trustworthy and consistent. And the whole church believed it, right? Everyone believed in the papacy. But the latter doesn't, right? Back to the clown pope. The latter day, he hinges his arguments on loose interpretations and scholarship. Oh, you haven't read this, you haven't read that scholar. It doesn't matter what the fathers say. That they're somehow they're nothing. They're mincemeat. And nailing down his position is like nailing jelly to the wall, right? So when he disproved young pope, and I'm getting ahead of myself because these are written comments, the apologist whips out clown pope. And when he disproved clown pope, he whips out young pope. It's like this schizophrenic rope-a-dope. But he always starts with young pope, and with the ignorant, what the young pope says is final. It's only like when they run to orthodoxy upon scrutiny, like an escape hatch, clown pope is whipped out as a means to clarify his claims and protect them against honest scrutiny. And so the challenge of the Orthodox, and that being the Orthodox that aren't following clown popism, is the Orthodox believe their claims to be fundamentally historically accurate and universal, right? We believe that the fathers are consistent. We believe the fathers are in agreement about these things. We believe the fathers all teach the same thing. You don't hear good Orthodox apologists say, well, the Council of Chalcedon was wrong about the letter of Epis, or, well, that saint was wrong about this, that saint was wrong about that. Like, they never talk this way because the saints never talk this way. And so let me illustrate how this may come out, right? So the young pope would believe in the decree of Vatican I, right? That the successor of the Apostle Peter having this papal supremacy, that this is the ancient, unchanging faith of the whole church, right? So that'd be young pope. Now, we may respond as Orthodox. It's demonstrable that the Immaculate Conception, papal supremacy, these doctrines contemporaneous to the 19th century, defined in Vatican I's time, were neither ancient nor the unchanged faith of the whole church. I mean, for the Immaculate Conception, you can't find it anywhere in the early church. For the papacy, it's arguable. A lot of mainstream scholarship will say, well, some popes were pushing towards it or had some idea of it, or it was solidified in the 5th century. You say, well, it was a post-Hildebrandian thing, but the point is, it's certainly not the whole church.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not unchanged. And so when the post-trad runs into this, now he puts on his clown pope hat, right? Now he puts on the clown pope hat and he says, what is ancient? What is unchanging? Could the seed of something be that ancient, unchanging faith? That whole seed could have been everywhere. The whole church had the invisible seed, but it really only grew in Rome, right? But no one says, wait, this is fundamentally dishonest. The guy with this hat wouldn't believe that, right? He only put on the other hat.
Yeah.
You can't prove this. This doesn't work. So my response would be, and I'm going to put back the Orthodox hat that says Bronx. Such criteria is as slippery as a snake. Can't the seed of the opposite, right? Like, why isn't the seed that no one believed in this? That is the opposite of all your presuppositions. Can't that exist everywhere? It's just as invisible, right? So can't that exist everywhere? What if I told you, to quote the Morpheus meme, what if I told you that not only the seed, but the unchanged faith of the whole church was explicitly conciliar, right? The councils explicitly invoke, and they represent the whole world, that they speak by the Holy Spirit, right? So they're claiming that they have this ultimate authority, that the ultimate authority is conciliar. And they review papal pronouncements and sometimes reject them, like Vigilius's First Constitutum. So what would you think, Deacon Joseph, in a few words, the young pope would respond to that?
The young pope, I think, would basically, first off, I think the young pope would be throwing on a few more things that are claiming to be ex cathedra than they are. So
here you go. Here's what he's going to say. He's going to say, formula hermistas. The whole church accept the formula hermistas. That's all the Vatican I claims right there. Right? You've heard that one.
Yeah, I have.
So I've done videos on this. Your history's wrong. Historians don't see this as proof as Vatican I. We have a whole video on this. They were allowed to make separate formulas in the same tenor, which didn't necessarily have these claims, and we have proof of this. And what's the young pope yell back? That's revisionism. It's not true. Now I'll give the young pope credit, because at least he's trying to say what he believes is really real, right? Like if it's revisionism, then at least what he believes actually existed in history. But the clown pope is going to say the formula is the same. Everything implicit. Everyone implicitly accepted it or similar claims. It says same tenor, so they didn't. By not rejecting it, they must have accepted everything because they made similar formulas. My interpretation is speedier than yours is. So, what's your comments on that exchange? That's exchange number one. Before we get to exchange number two.
Hate to interrupt this, because I've seen this question pop up a few times. I'm not doing a show this weekend. Okay, I'm done.
All right, and if you keep asking, we're going to ban you off the chat. Yes, like 15 times. There's going to be no Quran show. Live with it. So your response to that?
I might actually do a Quran show later in the week, though.
But not this weekend.
No, not the weekend. No.
All right, there you go. So, all right, we'll go on to the next one, and we're back to the young pope. What's the young pope going to tell the Protestants that are thinking of converting to an apostolic church like Orthodoxy? The councils taught papism. Look at their surrender to Pope Leo and Chalcedon, Pope Agatho and Constantinople III, Pope Adrian and Nicaea II. You know, councils have always accepted the Pope as supreme over everything. And so Orthodox may respond with reality and say the councils taught the superiority of councils over the papacy. The Fifth Council excommunicated the Pope. The Sixth Council doesn't mean what you think it does. The Seventh Council differs in the Greek manuscript tradition. So you can't say he really even... what Pope Adrian I taught was something that was even really accepted by that council. And so we just had this with the lovely post-trads, and they put on their postmodernist hat, their clown pope. All right? The councils can be corrected by other councils. Look at the episode, The Letter of Ebus, right? Like, they accepted a heretical letter, so they had to fix it in Constantinople II. So the councils are reformable. The Pope accepted the Fifth Council, yes, but not his own excommunication. So the parts of the Fifth Council never ratified the Pope, they're not binding. And when Agatho said the papacy's position rests upon conciliar approval, he didn't mean it, right? He just didn't mean it. And the Greek minutes of Nicaea too, they're forgeries because, well, no saint ever taught this, and no scholar taught this really until the 1960s. But Father Richard Price says so, Dr. Eric Lambers. So they're forgeries. So that means the Greek, flush it down the toilet. It's meaningless.
I did see something in the chat I just wanted to address real quick. It was about St. Mark, about the Council of Florence. Thomas had said, I tried to explain that, but he claims someone arguing for the Council of Florence claims 5 of our patriarchs accepted it instead of a few bishops acting on their own. I'm trying to explain how we're consistent, but his view is Western. You can actually put that to death really fast because St. Mark of Ephesus was actually representing 3 sees. So in fact, only Constantinople and
he was dead, so he didn't accept it either.
Yeah.
So if Pope Liberius, when he signed the Semi-Arian Council, that doesn't count because he was being tortured, which I agree with because St. Athanasius agrees with that. But if that doesn't count because he didn't mean it, how does someone who's dead count?
Yeah, exactly. So you can't even count
that doesn't work. So yeah,
So-
that's way overused in Roman Catholicism, and you have to have a very low IQ understanding of history to even broach that, I think. So anyway, back to my theoretical exchange. So how do we respond to some of these things about this clown pope response to Pope Agatho not really meaning he needed conciliar approval and all this stuff? Well, my response is Father Richard Price, for example, explicitly rejected that the Fifth Council thought of themselves as correcting the Fourth Council. We just had that wonderful interview on Reason Theology. He said, well, they didn't view themselves as doing that. So how do you say that's what they're doing if the people doing it didn't think that's what they were doing? Right?
It's straightforward.
I mean, yeah, it makes zero sense. As in Father Richard Price's word, they're espousing conciliar fundamentalism. Now, Father Richard Price teaches also that Constantinople II excommunicated the Pope. Right? Father Richard Price teaches that ecumenicity is either vertical, which means this is a term he used that's in quotations, meaning unchanging teaching determines ecumenicity, meaning it's orthodoxy, or horizontal, meaning the whole world receives the teaching, i.e. receptionism. For those who want to look that up, go to page 134, 135 of his 2019 article on Constantinople 3 and 4. For those who actually read this stuff, which I think is not very many, and also, just so people know, Father Richard Price and Dr. Lamberts are in disagreement with the majority of scholarship on Nicaea II. So we had this in a chill stream a little while back, how someone said not one period, single period, Byzantine period, scholar period thinks that the Greek minutes are reliable. Actually, the majority of scholars thought the Greek minutes were more reliable than the Latin minutes. Right? I could put in one hand the people that prefer the Latin minutes of Nicaea II, and that is Father Richard Price, who's on the heels, literally, because he finished his translation for Dr. Lamberts, finished his critical edition, and a guy named Wallach in the 1960s. 3 people. And it's not like the majority of scholarship stopped publishing on this stuff. The most recent defense of the Greek minutes was in 1989, which is an ancient history. So in a field with very few scholars, the critical editions of Nicaea II and reliability, the majority of scholars actually agree with the Orthodox on this, but, don't let reality get in the way. So they whip out young Pope to respond to this because, again, all that postmodernist hogwash isn't even true. What's he going to say? Only the Latin manuscripts count because that's what the Pope received and defined. And the scholarship's wrong, right? Price is not infallible. Just because Father Richard Price thinks that monothelitism, diathelitism are the same thing, and that's contrary to Pope Martin I, well, he's not infallible. So I don't accept that. I accept the Latin manuscripts. I accept the Pope. The Pope did not ratify his own excommunication, so that doesn't count in the Fifth Council. And the Latin words of Nicaea II must mean papal supremacy, and because only the Latin manuscripts count, that means that the Pope was teaching papal supremacy, and Vatican I was the early teaching of the papacy. All right, so that's how he may respond. So I'm going to say this, put in my Orthodox hat, and this is a little preview of a surprise show next Friday. There's going to be a big-time debate next Friday. I'm not releasing the name. You'll find out on Friday. And so that being said, here's a little preview. Similar Latin statements, like you'll read in Nicaea II, such as in the Caroline book, say things that explicitly sound like papal supremacy. In fact, they are more extreme in their claims than what you would read in some of these papal letters. But in the same books, they spend chapters rejecting the things the Pope taught ex cathedra to an ecumenical council. So, for example, in the Caroline books, for those not aware, the Carolingian theologians disagreed with Pope Adrian. And because he wrote letters in approval of iconodulia, and they disagreed with it. And so they were saying he was wrong, tit for tat, in a nauseating way. Deacon, you've read some of the excerpts of the Caroline letters, right? So you know what I'm talking about. So, right, they're disagreeing with the Pope step by step by step. But look what the same book says about the Pope in the first book, chapter 6. It says, for as the apostolic sees in general are to be preferred to all other dioceses of the world, much more is that see to be preferred, which is placed over all other apostolic sees. For just as the apostles were exalted above the other disciples, and Peter was exalted above the other apostles, so the apostolic sees are exalted above the other sees, and the Roman see is eminent over the other apostolic sees. And this exaltation arises from no synodical action of the other churches, but she holds the primacy by the authority of the Lord himself when he said, "Thou art Peter." Right? So people see this and they go, "This proves papacy." I just quoted an anti-papal source.
Yeah.
So what you think proves the papacy did not prove the papacy to the person who wrote that, which shows you're being anachronistic. Right? People don't study the history. They don't read this stuff, so they don't understand that. So how may the clown pope respond? And he will say, did the Carolingian theologians really disagree with the papacy, or was it all rhetorical? Were they arguing about disciplines and not faith and morals in Adrian's letters? And the new pope's going to try to jump on you and say, we're to take the statement from book 1, chapter 6, the Caroline book that we just read. We're to take that literally. But all the criticism of the pope and his actions and any Carolingian assertion after the fact that approval is needed for a council to have effect, we're not going to take that literally. They didn't mean it. Or they were just wrong, but they were right about this. Right? So it's literally cherry picking. This is what we're running into, the schizophrenic apologetics, and we'll go nuts. So that's why I'd rather make fun of it with hats than like treat it seriously, because it's whack-a-mole. Right?
Yeah,
you choose one or you choose the other. Like, if you have to do that, how true could your claims be? So any comments? We'll go through one last exchange.
Let me see here. Well, I mean, I would agree. Whack-a-mole is a perfect way to describe it. And I've noticed that not just in Roman Catholic apologetics, as I've discovered recently. I see that a lot of Islamic apologetic is used that way also. That's I will say that what it comes down to is that if you can keep switching from a position of negative to positive, sure, your argument may look solid in terms of discussion. It may fool people, but it's clearly not the truth because it's self-contradictory. And so let me see here. All right, Mr. Bison Hat. I grew up. Oh, okay. And well, that's now Mr. Bison. You see, that's the Japanese version of the game. Now, in the American version, well, no, that's the American version of the game. Right, the Japanese version, it's actually the boxer, because they were saying M. Bison to be Mike Tyson.
Balrog. Right.
Yeah. So Balrog was actually at the end of the game, and they switched it because of possible issues with trademark, because of Mike Tyson's name. So that's why that was done.
There you go. So we got this question. How important and or critical is the Chieti document dispelling the dogmatic creeds on First Vatican Council on papal supremacy and infallibility? Deacon?
Let me take a look here. That's a good question. I would say that, you see, this is where we got to run into the problem of ecumenical dialogue versus reality. The Chieti document was an attempt to make clear that there was a what's the word I'm looking for? A kind of an Eastern and a Western view that everyone could agree upon. Give me just 1 second here before I finish it.
I'm taking over because I think Deacon Joseph's got to take care. I heard a bell ring.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just send a link real quick. Hold on a second.
All right, so I'm gonna fill the dead air. Someone asked, Thomas asked, can you have Father Josiah from Riverside, Cali on sometime? That guy has a good presence online. And even now he's my priest spiritual father when I started watching him. Didn't know he's my priest spiritual father. Ask him to come on. I actually sent an email. I wanted to have him on about Mariology, especially when all the post-trads were saying the Orthodox Church is really in favor of the Immaculate Conception. And, Craig's just bringing in Protestantism into Orthodoxy, which we don't hear so much anymore. They've become very quiet on that because they just embarrass themselves every time they open their mouths. And so that being said, I'd love to have him on, but he's going to be on the good old of According to John. So he'll have a show with According to John. And I'll just say, if you were on my show, you wouldn't have to wait. You wouldn't have to wait on Patreon to see it. It would be live. So I'll just leave it at that.
To finish what I was saying there on the Chieti thing, basically, when you're talking about kind of like the ecumenical version of what they want to create, where there's an East and a West, which kind of have their own views, but they can kind of agree on the Pope. Father Alexander Gatsopoulos, and I've brought him up a few times on the show. He's a priest of the State Church of Greece, and he wrote a critical analysis of Chieti, which basically points out that even the people in the West that they're citing did not have the high view of the Pope that the Roman Catholics were claiming in Chieti. So Chieti is supposed to be a compromise document where, like, the East does their things the Eastern way, the West does their things the Papist way, and he's like, no, wait a second. No, that's not true. The West didn't do that. That wasn't real. So, in a sense, is the Chieti document important? It is in terms of an ecumenical sense, but in terms of the actual teaching of the church, I think it actually misleads people. And I definitely recommend looking up Father Gatsopoulos' arguments.
All righty, there you go. So I'm going to do one more exchange. Guys, hold on to your hats and pay attention. This one's important. We got the young Pope. All right. Papacy has never changed his teachings and is infallible in his pronouncements, right? Basic papacy 101, we'd hope, right? All right, the Orthodox going to ruin it. Pope Innocent stated, infants have not life without Christ's baptism and without partaking of Christ's body and blood. That's quoted by St. Augustine, who's quoting Pope Innocent in the 2 letters against Pelagians, Book 2, Chapter 7. But Roman Catholics don't believe this anymore. And yet the Pope taught it. And Pope Adrian I asserted in his letter in Nicaea II that there's a difference between icons and statues, that is, an idol. Yet you reject both of these today because you have statues and you will not give infants the Christ body and blood. So that's the problem. So what's the young Pope response, right? The Pope never said either of those things. Augustine was wrong. You're reading a bad translation in Nicaea II. And so I'll just put on back my Orthodox hat. We presume saints like Augustine are fundamentally trustworthy. And just for those who know, if you read Father Richard Price's translation, it's really not markedly different. In fact, it's clearer on the same issue. And also we have Petavius, who's a Roman Catholic historian in the 1500s, who likewise reads the same passage to mean the same exact thing. And so we have that problem. And now we got to put on our clown Pope hat to respond to that one, right? Well, neither papal pronouncement was on faith and morals. Oh, man. So how did the Orthodox respond to 2 papal pronouncements, 1 to an ecumenical council, not being on faith and morals? So here's my Orthodox response. How does whether an infant is saved or not a matter of faith and morals? How is whether a statue is an idol or not a matter of mortal sin, and that means a matter of faith and morals? Well, now the clown Pope has kind of changed things up a little bit. Back to clown Pope. Well, both teachings are not ex cathedra, so we don't know the context of teaching of baptism and communion. We don't know if it was from the seat of Peter to the whole church or simply his private opinion. We don't know if Adrian, when he quoted St. Stephen of Bostra in the Informative, that he agreed with all the contents of what he's quoting Stephen. So it's not like the Pope himself said it. And then the new Pope said, yeah, it never happened too. So, no, yeah, all that's true, but it never happened anyway. Right? So you'll never have him actually saying, well, I'll concede to you these points, but it's not true because it's not ex cathedra. But it's not ex cathedra, but also it didn't happen anyway. So that's what we're dealing with. And so my closing comments would be, if the papacy is true, why is it defended in such a slippery, disingenuous way? I know I'm being humorous. People are going to say I'm strawmanning them. But all the stuff I said comes from the post-trad apologists. I'm just repeating their arguments wearing a hat. So post-trad apologetics is precisely being peddled by all those interacting with orthodoxy because they cannot default to young Pope in order to disprove orthodoxy. So they need to break the glass. When in trouble with the Orthodox, whip out the clown Pope so they can assuage their own consciences by muddying the waters of postmodernism. So this post-traditionalism is essentially for the intellectually feeble and for the lazy. But here's the problem. Even though it's more for the former, there is an appeal to the latter, to laziness. Why? Because we can't all be history scholars, right? One does not need to be a history scholar to be a post-trad. You could have this pretty rudimentary understanding of absolute Vatican I papal claims, and then you can reread all of history piecemeal, and if something's inconsistent, you just put on the clown Pope hat in order to make it work. So it doesn't even matter how wrong the young Pope's claims prove out to be. thanks to the clown pope hat, you could simply internalize everything and disregard anything inconvenient. So this is a lot less work than harmonizing all of history, which is what the Orthodox actually have to do whenever they deal with a papal statement or a filioque statement or whatever the Roman Catholics pose to us, because we actually have to harmonize these things. We actually have to affirm our saints. And that's why I'm against when Orthodox say, well, this saint's just wrong, because that's what post-trads do. That is a Roman Catholic apologetic. We should not be doing their apologetics. And so the post-trad ultimately sung with a heart set upon the young pope, but his hat he has to wear often with the Orthodox is the clown pope. And this is not a coincidence, because post-traditionalism is just a reality, this oddball online echo chamber of people that want to be the young pope living in a modern, post-modernist church environment, who deep down want there to be young pope to settle their epistemic uncertainty about religion, but need the clown pope to give their yearning any sort of basis in reality. So it is inherently contradictory, and people need to be aware of this. This is why liberal Roman Catholics, they don't offend me, right? People that always wear this hat, they don't offend me, because there's a consistency to what they believe. It's consistently inconsistent, right? Because it's postmodernist. And actual trads, they don't actually offend me, because they actually will believe, no, everyone really did believe in the papacy, and it didn't evolve over time. At least that's not schizophrenic. But post-traditionalism, what's being peddled on YouTube against the Orthodox, it's schizophrenic. So it's the post-trads that offend me, because they offend me intellectually, let alone the personal stuff they resort to. But really, more importantly, their whole method is dishonest to the extreme, and that's why what comes from them, there is no holiness and there's no fruit. So those are my closing comments on this issue. Deacon, you've been very patient. How about you give us any comments on what I had, and maybe any of your closing comments?
I think to a large degree you're right. And what I mean by that is it actually is a reflection of the society that we live in now. Right now we live in a society where the truth is known, but we're willing to believe in untruths. We're willing to believe in falsehoods. Even look at the COVID narrative that's occurring, and that's just one example. Contradictions that exist, and I think your description of the young pope versus the clown pope actually is a very good clarification. And what I mean by that is that by juxtaposing them against each other, and I had no idea you were going to do that, but it actually works, because ultimately what we live in is a society that is obsessed with doublespeak. And ultimately the post-trad apologist is doing doublespeak. And so what it comes down to is, to filter the truth out, you actually have to find it, and you can't trust a lot of these people. As I mentioned, a lot of these post-trad apologists are doing it because it's their only coping mechanism with a church that has ultimately become inconsistent. Some of them are doing it for the money. That's true. And some of them are making a healthy profit off of it. But what it comes down to... Some
aren't, but they're still trying. God bless them.
Oh, okay.
Some aren't making a lot of money, but they're trying to. Get trying, right?
They are gonna. Yep, they're gonna keep trying though. Let me see here. Is somebody asked? I think it's Halloween at Deacon's house. I'm not sure how, considering that's not a picture of my house.
There it goes again.
That's actually my messenger. It's not actually a doorbell. And so
ruined it for everyone. You ruined it for
everyone. But in any case, okay. Hold on one moment.
So that being said, someone asked, what did he say about Nicaea II and statues? There is, just so people know, Nicaea II has a lot of tension on the issue of statues. So it goes back and forth. But long story short, we have Pope Adrian I in his letter to the emperors condemning the use of statues as idolatry. So for some reason, you'll have these post-traditional apologists saying, oh, well, there's something in this letter that I think is about papal supremacy, and so that means the whole church really accepted this, and yet they just don't keep reading the letter where this is this condemnation of statues as idols. So they're making these statements while they have statues behind them, so it's really ironic. Now, just so people know, that same letter also says that if God ordains the creation of the statue, it becomes acceptable, like the cherubim. So that's not the most consistent thing logically speaking, but I could only tell you what the letter says when he's quoting St. Stephen of Bostra in the affirmative. Whether or not you like how he makes the argument and how he says it is a whole other matter. I'm a history guy. I'm not here to solve all the tensions of history. I'm just here to tell you what it says.
Oh, well, I would say this is that even the statuary that you find from before the 11th century, whether in the West or in the East, is usually flat. It's considerably closer to bas relief or bas relief, however you pronounce it, than it is to what we think of in terms of freestanding statues, with the possible exception of the rood statues and cross on top of the Western rood screen, which are, again, still relatively flat when we look at the historical images. So I think I hate to bring up an old Conan O'Brien episode, but it kind of,
he wrote the episode on the monorail of The Simpsons. So
no. I'm bringing up the episode. There was an episode of Conan called Manger Rangers, where basically they took the nativity figures and used them like action figures. And I think the whole point is Western statuary from before the schism was much closer to iconography than it was to these kind of action figure sort of looking statues. So I would really question the nature of the statuary, because I don't think that that's been fully developed in Western and Orthodox thinking. But I think it's a Western.
Well, and that's also in the art. Western art is supposed to convey movement and wants to convey movement, right? And so it's both the two-dimensional and the three-dimensional. Now, here's something Theodore says, I think a good comment. I generally like Roman Catholic laity. I agree with him. This includes the trads, yes. It's the polemicists I dislike, especially when they attack the energy essence distinction as heresy. That makes their own church doctors heretics. And that's precisely the problem, Theodore, because post-traditionalism has no problem saying, well, the Cappadocians are wrong in the Filioque. They're wrong in energy essence. These saints are wrong. And you would never have people saying saints are wrong. Right? So really, this modernism has become incipient in Roman Catholicism because the increase of awareness has brought forward that this view that the saints are consistent, what we believe and what traditionalists used to believe, is just untenable historically. So they've been forced to adopt a new hat because history is so solidly against them. Like, it doesn't mean like there's no tensions in the Orthodox view of history, but it's far, far, far more defensible than the Roman Catholic view by Roman Catholic scholars, right? That's why people could read Father Richard Price. They could listen to Father Richard Price, and he sounds a lot more Orthodox, and he's really not intending to be, because he's just reading the history. So that is something for people to be aware of. Now, here's a question for you, Deacon Joseph.
Yeah, I actually saw two questions like this related, so I'm going to put them together, because one was this one: does Deacon Joseph think that the issue with ecumenism and the official patriarchates will be resolved, or is the future of Orthodoxy GOC groups? A couple of moments later, Thomas TRW asked, if the Moscow Patriarchate declares the EP in schism, what would result the Greek Orthodox who decide to stay with the Church? What happens with Athos and Orthodox lands? Okay, well, in the first place, the answer to the question, and I talked about this with Bishop Enoch last week on NFTU News, which I think is still only on Odyssey. I'm of the minority view in Genuine Orthodoxy that something big could happen with the Patriarchates. I personally think something big is happening with the Patriarchates, as we can see from the possible declaration of schism on the part of Constantinople in November by Moscow. The real question is the future is always going to rely on tradition. That's what it comes down to. It was Father Andrew Phillips, priest in Rocor, and he put it best when he talked about the old calendarists. He said, if the churches return to tradition, if the churches condemn ecumenism, if the churches condemn modernism, then the old calendarists will collapse in a moment. But as it stands, and he wrote this 15 years ago, he said, as it stands, the old calendarists have a bright future ahead of them. 15 years later, I don't know. But I mentioned back in 1997, when I first came in, Georgia had just left the World Council of Churches, and every true Orthodox person I talked to said, they'll be back in a couple of years. But that never happened. In fact, the opposite happened. And then, nobody expected what happened with the Church of Poland in 2014. Nobody's expecting what happened with COVID now. And certainly nobody expected the schism of 2018. None of this was expected. So we're living in very interesting times. And my answer is going to stay the same, as long as there's massive deviation that's sanctioned against tradition. And you're seeing that less and less in the Moscow Patriarchate, for example. And sadly, in one article I read more and more in True Orthodoxy, if tradition is sanctioned, the church will flourish. And if tradition is condemned, the church will continue to divide. So that's really what my answer is. And as for things like those who stay with the Patriarchate after they're condemned in schism, or what happens to authors, I don't even know, and I'm the wrong person.
They'll just still attach themselves to bishops like they did even with the Greek calendarists, and the ones that are loyal to the ecumenical patriarch won't. So they'll just split along those lines. It's not like it's like what will happen in Africa, just like what happened when Antioch went Roman Catholic, but half the bishops didn't.
1724, yeah.
With Constantinople. So you'll have even geographic areas which will be split.
Well, that's happening in Alexandria now. Hundreds of clergy just, applied to the Moscow Patriarchate. And so, who knows? I can't tell.
The Church in America would probably split along Ephraimite lines. The
Ephraimites are already, on very bad terms with the Patriarch, and they could always join ROCOR. They were part of them before.
So we got this from Joseph Kerr. Where do you see Rome going from this point forward? A steady march towards Francis' path, reforms to draw trads back in, where we see Vatican III in our lifetime. Here's my opinion, Joseph. My opinion is that the short term, the next 20 years, belongs to the liberals. And the question is how much damage they can do in the next 20 years. Because I think more than 50% of the College of Cardinals have all been appointed during the time of, and I think it's like closer to 70, it might be 80% during the time of Pope Francis. So it's like having a ultra super majority. They're going to control everything. This is going to get way worse before it gets better for Roman Catholics. However, they cannot proliferate, is I think the point. It's liberalism is a cancer that kills itself. And I think the Roman Catholic body is too big. It's not like ELCA, Lutherans. It's not even the Southern Baptist Convention. They're nothing compared to Roman Catholic Church. So you could literally destroy 90% of the Roman Catholic Church and still be one of the biggest religions on earth. And so I think the future belongs to traditional Roman Catholics. The question is how many will, because they're pursuing tradition but have access to far more information, will ultimately become Orthodox. And so I don't know. So I actually think just looking at it historically and not like trying to put a lens with prophecy or anything, just historically, it seems that time will eventually vindicate the trads in Roman Catholicism, is my opinion. So I don't know if you got any opinion on that.
I'm not as optimistic on traditionalist Roman Catholics. I think we're going to see more and more people joining Orthodoxy. I hate to say that, but I think Francis is basically setting up the future for at least the next 3 decades, if we have 3 decades. And the point is, by the time it's over, I think we will see a redistribution of Christianity. Maybe not all of them will go to Orthodoxy. Maybe many will go to Protestant.
There's a dog.
Yep, there's a dog. Yes, and so but the point is, the Roman position as it is now, young pope versus clown pope, that's untenable. People will not spiritually survive something like that forever, and I think that they're going to probably try to aim for some big things in liberalism, and Constantinople will probably join them. It doesn't change the greater scheme of history. It could very well be that this is all happening so that they can all unite and form their religion, their humanistic religion of the future, and the Orthodox can finally be left alone and fix their own problems.
And that's why probably a good chunk of the NATO-oriented Orthodox churches will be joining Roman Catholicism sooner rather than later for that reason. But may God prevent that from happening. Now, guys, we're going to close out with some memes. And scrolling the bottom is my plug, orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. If this has blessed you, please bless the growth of the churches in Cambodia. Please pray for me and my salvation, and pray pray for the show, and I'd really appreciate it. But again, this has blessed you. Please go to orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. And if you don't donate money, I'll still keep doing my thing anyway, because it's not about the money, but it's an opportunity for you to help parishes grow in Cambodia and convert people to the faith. So you could take advantage of that opportunity. But bless your local monastery, give alms, just do something that blesses someone else. So that is my plug, which I'll have rolling there. Deacon Joseph, tell people about your Mimi reboot of Orthodox Apologetics channel. And really, you've really turned it up. It's a way more entertaining show.
Well, I wasn't trying to necessarily be more Mimi. I guess I just stopped caring. So I just started doing things, decided to have more fun with it. I think once I deleted my Twitter account, and I realized I'm going to probably be broadcasting to other areas. I'm probably going to be focused on other places, alternative social networks. My social presence has gone down. I've had a lot of fun going on Odyssey and putting stuff up there. So definitely, I recommend people, if you know my YouTube channel, follow us on Odyssey. All the shows will be there. And sometimes I'm going to start doing exclusives because, it's time to get out of the big tech stranglehold. And Craig, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but that service has a feature. They'll copy all your shows for you, so you don't even have to do the copying of the shows and stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm just too lazy. Let me make this comment, and I'm going to make it bigger so people see my face today. Is like, I really don't want to do this forever. I got like other stuff in my life. I prefer to focus more on writing. I prefer to focus. I wouldn't mind being like guest for someone else, but like I prefer someone else sitting in this. Someone could take this channel. We want to do a show on, do you want to be Orthodox apologist? And I don't know, maybe we'll do several, but eventually I want there to be a winner, and I want them to take all the subscribers. I don't want to do this forever. You know what I mean? I don't want to put the effort in it. If someone wants to do all the tech stuff, that's great. But when it comes down to it is, I feel I've hit my ceiling, right? There's only so far you could get. And then like for me to really do much better than this takes investment in categories, which I can't do. So I feel you're getting as best as you're going to get, I think, for me. And I'm aware of that. And so, the Beatles ended on top. They made Abbey Road, good album. And so I'm not saying I'm going to end tomorrow, but when I feel I'm not going to produce good material, I'm just not going to produce it. Or I'm just going to start making like those solo albums, which are more artistic creations, which people don't like as much. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I can't invest the time in it. I don't have the desire to. But if someone else wants to take my material and invest that time, that's fine with me.
You see, I've been in that position now for the better part of a decade. And I'm always looking for the next good apologist to come forward. And really, I would suggest to you, I'm very impressed with how you've developed over the years. And the point is, I suggest, bug your listeners, get them on the show, get them into this, find the next Craig Trulia. That's how you have to do it. The exit strategy, I hate to say it, for apologists is making other apologists. Otherwise, you didn't do a good job in the first place.
You've been saying that for a few years. That's true.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that sometimes it has results, sometimes it doesn't. But God works in His own ways. But just encourage people. That's what I would say. That you're trusted as somebody who knows what they're talking about. Use that and encourage others to, emulate and be a better example,
I believe me, I want someone who's going to produce more professional material than me, speak a little slower, be a little more patient with some of the low IQ stuff. There's so many things you can improve from what I do. And I sort of want to focus on more narrower things that don't lend themselves easily to apologetics. Because here's why, Deacon. I remember when I went on your show and I gave that 20-minute talk on Nicaea 2, and we got a little bit of today. So I finished the article. It's 14,000 words, maybe more. I know no one's going to read this thing, and the post-trads are going to be too stupid to even understand it. They don't even understand Father Richard Price. They don't understand Dr. Lambers. They don't understand any of that. So they're not going to understand the response to it either. So there's a point like, well, who on earth am I writing this for at this point? Right? Like it's like pretty much only academics could follow this at this point. So yeah, it gets you thinking like, well, there's a certain point where I'm spinning my wheels.
When you finish the thing, just put up a show on it and put a link to it. Get the viewers to read it. I think a lot of people here would read it.
The coming out party will be next Friday, and there'll be a debate with a scholar, and it will be on that topic. I'll just leave it at that. So people will you'll have the low, I'd say, accessible debate format, right? And then you'll have the 14,000 words with all the citations and the primary sources and text crawling through the critiques that, let's say, Dr. Lambers gives, and you have all the detail, which most people just are not going to have the patience to go into because they're not going to read 14,000 words, though they should, but that's a whole other matter. But anyway, let's get the memes. And then we'll call it a night. It's been long enough. So
yeah, I got to pick up my son and a few actually from work.
All right. So 2 memes. That's it, guys. Because then Deacon Joseph saying goodbye. His channel is linked on the bottom, so you can follow Deacon Joseph's Orthodox Apologetics channel. But we see a jury of English majors. I didn't do nothing, and the jury thinks, ooh, a confession. It's because there's a double negative, guys. So not really a papal meme. We're going to scroll to the bottom. I hope we get one. And I don't know what I'm going to see here. Get you a man who will never lay a finger on you or walk out of your life. I don't get it. I guess because he doesn't have arms.
Oh, he has no arms or legs.
What's the joke here? I don't get it.
He'll never lay a finger on her because he has no fingers, and he'll never walk out of her life because he has no legs.
And so I guess it means it makes him a better husband?
I don't know. I think that's kind of making fun of the handicapped. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and I don't get it. I don't even know if it's Photoshop. That's a real couple or whatever. But it is what it is. So anyway, I guess we're gonna call it an evening, and I'll say, guys, hopefully this gives you an idea of the eternal schizophrenia of post-traditional apologetics. So when you hear it. Now I want you to start realizing, wait, look at the dishonesty. Are they even aware of how dishonest they're being? And then I want you to be critical of Orthodox apologetics and for us to pursue the patristic method and the harmonizing the fathers and having the faith that the church is preserving the church and it's unchanged, the truth and it's unchanged. So both of us will leave it at that. Deacon Joseph, thank you so much for going on and for inspiring the show.
Thank you for having me, and you have it's a great show. Enjoy it, and I hope you're here for many more years yet. Even though I know you don't, but maybe you'll find that successor. All right, well, I'm gonna go and take care, everyone. Happy feast, and have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Fight to death for the truth, as Jesus Sirach says, and Lord God will fight for you. God bless you all. Have a good night.
Good night.